Chapter 123. Help! The two men forcibly pressed Jinwan down. One skillfully restrained her arms behind her back, while the other quickly covered her mouth with a wet cloth. They were well-trained and professional, making it impossible for her to dodge. Although Jinwan was prepared, she was still restrained in less than a second. Her mouth was covered harshly, and she could not even utter a complete sentence. You. In her struggle, she tried to remember the appearance of the two men, but before she could see them clearly, her head was pressed down harshly. Their rough fingers pressed down on an extremely vulnerable spot on the back of her neck, causing blood to rush to her brain and her vision to blur. It was difficult to even focus her eyes. "Miss G, we're only following orders. Please cooperate. Otherwise, we can't guarantee that we won't hurt you," the man who held her down said in a rough and ruthless voice. Jinwan stiffened and did not resist desperately. The two men quickly brought her out. Her mouth was covered with force, so she could not cry out. Soon she was pushed into the back seat of the black jeep. Only after the door was closed did Jinwan breathe freely. She turned to see that the back seat and the front seat were completely separated. There was a solid metal plate in the middle, and she could not see what was happening in front. The rear doors and windows were also sealed shut, and the only door that could be opened was locked from the outside in an instant. Jinwan raised her hand and twisted the door several times in vain. No matter how she hit or kicked, it would not open. The car window was reinforced with a black film. The people outside could not see inside, and the people inside could not see outside. It was a vast expanse of darkness. "Who on earth are you? Let me out of the car." Jinwan turned around and slapped the metal plate in front of her. She did not know if the people in front heard her, but no matter how she yelled or slapped, she could not hear any sound. She could only feel that the car had started the engine and was driving away from the Yew Garden at an extremely fast speed. Who sent these people to kidnap her? The security in the Yew Garden was so perfect. Why were the people at home suddenly not here? Would Auntie Chen and the others be all right? Even though she knew it was futile, Jinwan still slapped the door hard for a long time. There was no sound at all in front. It was clear that the metal plate was soundproof. Jinwan leaned against the metal plate weakly. Boundless darkness and unknown fear surrounded her. Her hands and feet gradually turned cold. She stared at a spot in the darkness and slowly narrowed her eyes. To be able to sneak into the Yew Garden without a trace and without the slightest feeling of chaos in the house, it was most likely the G family or the Mo family. After all, only these two families would Auntie Chen not suspect them and would let them in. Mo Jingshan told her not to wander around these days and to go home early was more or less reminded her that she would be in danger. Recalling the scene when she was locked in the bathroom that day, Jinwan could roughly sense that Mo Jingshan's father, Mo Shaoza, was a person who would not rest until he achieved his goals. As long as he wanted to do something, even if it meant offending Mo Jingshan, even if his methods were ruthless and unacceptable, he would not hesitate to do it. Just now, when the two men restrained her, they had warned her, but apart from taking her away, they did not seem to have any intention of harming her. Jinwan was most likely Mo Shaoza. Jinwan's originally panicked heart gradually calmed down. No matter what Mo Shaoza was planning to do, it would definitely not endanger her life. The Mo family and the Ji family were both prominent families in Haicheng. With Mo Jingshan in the mix, Mo Shaoza would not dare to kill anyone. As the car drove, the surroundings were dark. It was impossible to tell how much time had passed. Every minute and second felt like an entire year. Jinwan closed her eyes in dizziness because of the increasingly scarce air behind the car. Regardless of Mo Shaoza's motive, she had to conserve her energy first before she could face him with a clear mind. After an unknown amount of time, she finally heard the car door open. Jinwan opened her eyes. She squinted because of the strong light outside the car, but before she could clearly see the appearance of the two, she was abruptly dragged out by them. They still pressed her down and covered her mouth. However, this time, Jinwan's resistance was much weaker. She only made 2 woo-woo sounds before she was brought in. The two nimbly pushed her into a room. Jinwan stumbled and fell to the floor inside. Her arms hurt when they hit the ground. She forced herself to sit up and looked up at the door that was quickly closed. "Miss G, please stay here for a night. Tomorrow morning, we'll send you back." The voices of the two came from outside the door, followed by the sound of their footsteps leaving. Jin-Wan rushed to the door, but it was already locked from the inside. The door in front of her was made of high-grade oak wood. It was very sturdy. If it was locked from the inside, it would be impossible to break it open without hard tools. Jin-Wan's hand paused on the door. She abruptly turned back to look at the dark room. Although she could not see clearly, she felt that the floor she fell on was of good quality. This place did not seem like a place that kidnappers would use because it was very high-grade. She tentatively raised her hand and felt around the wall by the door. When she found the light switch, she pressed it with a "pa" sound. The light in the room suddenly turned on. Although it was not a glaring light, it was a soft light that allowed one to see everything clearly. What entered her eyes was a very luxurious guest room. It had all the daily necessities, including a bathroom. There was a large bed in the center of the room. Although it looked elegant and exquisite, from the furnishings, it was indeed a guest room. Directly opposite, there was a window behind the curtains. Jin-Wan quickly walked over and pulled open the curtains. The sky outside was already dark. She estimated that it was at least 7 or 8 in the evening. The window was not a floor-to-ceiling window, but an ordinary square window. This was the 3rd floor of an unknown villa. It was not particularly tall, but the window was explosion-proof and could not be broken. The only small window that could be opened was also locked. She had thought that the mastermind behind the kidnappers had made a mistake and thought that they could escape through the window. The glimmer of hope that had just been ignited was once again shattered. Jin-Wan stood by the window and looked out. She saw the large swimming pool behind the villa and the surrounding flower beds full of life. Was there someone living here now? This window faced the back of the villa. There was no road behind, nor were there any people or cars passing by. Even if the lights were on in the room, no one would be able to see her if she stood by the window and made a gesture of knocking on the window for help. There was no way to escape. Jin-Wan paced back and forth in the room. Chapter 124. Jin-Wan hugged her legs as she sat by the window, staring at the sky outside. Being locked up here, time seemed to have stopped. It was only when she vaguely heard the sound of a car approaching that she abruptly stood up. She turned and rushed to the door, pressing her ear against it. This was the 3rd floor. She could not hear the movements on the 1st floor clearly, but she did hear a loud knock on the door. Then, there were footsteps approaching from the 1st floor. Jin-Wan raised her hand and tried to knock on the door twice, wanting to remind the person rushing over that she was locked up here. "You still have the strength to knock on the door. Did you think the person who came was Jingshin?" All of a sudden, a voice that was slightly unfamiliar to Jin-Wan came from outside. That voice carried the experience and low voice of a middle-aged man. His tone was cold and even a little disdainful. Jin-Wan's hand immediately froze on the door. "Miss G, I'm Emo Jingshin's father. Today, I invited you here to stay for a night. I have no intention of harming you. After tomorrow, you'll be free." In Emo Xiao's words, the so-called freedom, Jin-Wan could clearly hear another layer of meaning. She was silent for a moment before raising her voice to say, "Since you're Jingshin's father, I should call you Dad in name. We're a family. Why did you lock me up? This Dad, I can't accept it." Emo Xiaoza coldly said, "Jingshin has more important things to do tonight. He doesn't have time to deal with your problem. You can stay here in peace." "Where is Emo Jingshin right now?" Jin-Wan instinctively had a bad premonition. "From today onwards, his whereabouts have nothing to do with you. You can only stay here today. Don't run out and ruin his plans." After coldly saying this, Emo Xiaoza directly left the door. He did not plan on saying another word to her. At the same time, there was the sound of a car approaching. Jin-Wan suppressed the layers of uneasiness in her heart and leaned against the door to listen carefully. Not long after, she heard what sounded like the sound of a walking stick hitting the ground. Following that, Elder Mo's angry roar rang from the staircase. "You locked that G-brat here, didn't you? Let her out right now." It was grandfather. Jin-Wan frantically knocked on the door. "Grandfather." I'm here. Grandpa, there was a short silence outside. She was on this floor, so Grandfather Mo might not be able to hear her. Outside, Elder Mo raised his voice and scolded, Xiao Zhe. No matter how much power you have in America, don't forget that Hai Chung still has me and Jingxin. If I want you to leave Shine, all I need to do is say the word. You don't even listen to your own father now, do you? Elder Mo angrily roared. He had rushed here in a hurry, and his words were rough. Jin Wan and Jingxin's relationship is very good. If you dare to force this loving couple to live the rest of their lives in torment, don't even think about entering the Mo family's doors in this lifetime. I don't recognize you as my cruel and merciless son. Father, please calm down. Mo Xiaozhe had already descended. His tone was neither fast nor slow. It's already this late. The setup that should be set has already been set. The people who should be involved have already entered. Even if you fly over now, it'll be useless. Jingxin can't stay in the country forever. Many years ago, he had his own achievements in America. In the future, when he inherits Shine, he will stay in America for a long time. In this huge Hai Cheng, a mere daughter of the Ji family is completely unsuitable for him. Whether he's suitable or not is Jingxin's own choice. Did you really think that back then, Jingxin and Jin Wan's marriage was completely arranged by me? If Jingxin hadn't agreed to it himself, even if I held a knife to his neck, he wouldn't have married her. Elder Mo said harshly. So what? Back then, when Jingxin left America, I already warned him. If he wasn't so hard to control, I wouldn't have used such a method. He belongs to Shine. He can't be limited to this Hai Ching forever. If he wants to leave, he has to break away from Jin Wan, an unimportant shackle. Mo Xiaozhe's reply was cold and arrogant, leaving no room for negotiation. T. You kidnapped Jin Wan, drugged your own son, and locked him in a hotel room within Shuyan. Did you learn such despicable methods from those Americans? Hearing these words, Jin Wan, who had been quietly standing by the door, felt as though she had fallen into an icy lake. Her blood from head to toe lost all warmth. Since I've sent Shu Yen to Hai Cheng, I don't plan on sending her back to the Yin family in America. She must marry Jingxin. Mo Xiaozhe's tone was cold and arrogant. You're already old. There's no need to worry about the marriage of the younger generation. As long as we successfully get through tonight, perhaps Shu Yan's stomach will have the great-grandson you've longed for day and night. Are you trying to force Jingxin to his death, or are you trying to force me to my death? Mo Xiaozhe was cold and indifferent. Father, you came here. Even if you can bring Jin Wan away, what can you do? Before I came back, Jingxin and Shu Yan had already been together in the room for more than half an hour. Right now, even more time has passed. That kind of drug, not to mention Jingxin's hot-blooded age, even someone like you in your 70s or 80s would not be able to withstand it. You, bastard! Elder Mo abruptly raised his walking stick and viciously struck Mo Xiaozhe. How could I have a son like you? Immediately call the people over there to release Jingxin and Shu Yan. I can't watch as Jingxin is destroyed by you. It's too late. The drug takes effect quickly. No man can withstand it. If you open the door now, you'll undoubtedly be interrupting Jingxin's good time. You unfilial son. I really regret not strangling you to death in your swaddling clothes 50 years ago. Mo Xiaozhe sneered disapprovingly. If I die, where will you find such a good grandson in the future? Elder Mo angrily swatted him away with his walking stick and rushed upstairs. Where did you lock Jinwan up? Mo Xiaozhe saw that the elder had already gone up to the third floor. It was clear that he had heard Jinwan's incessant knocking on the door. His eyes were cold and displeased. However, because the elder had already found his way over, he coldly followed up. Jinwan was behind the door. Her lips had already been bitten until they bled. She forcefully knocked on the door. "Grandfather, I'm here." The sound of the walking stick and hurried footsteps approached at the same time. Elder Mo stepped forward and used his walking stick to hit the door harshly. He flew into a rage and turned back to glare at Mo Xiaozhe. "If you don't release Jinwan today, if you dare to let anything happen to either Jingxin or Jinwan, This old man will directly die in front of you. Father. Mo Xiaoze's expression was cold. Chapter 125. If this old man can't save my grandson and granddaughter-in-law today, I'll drag you, my own son, down with me. Elder Mo's anger shook the heavens as he turned and charged toward the staircase. Mo Xiaoze saw that he was serious and immediately furrowed his brows. Jin Wan can be released, but even if you bring her to look for Jingshan now, the result will be the same. Why do you have to do this? F***ck your mother's bullshit. Jingshan definitely won't touch the infamily's girl. Elder Mo harshly said. Are you going to release her or not? Do you want me to place righteousness before family and beat you, this unfilial son, to death? Will you only let this matter rest after the Mo family is destroyed? Mo Xiaoze was silent for a moment before abruptly shifting his gaze toward the bodyguard at the staircase. The bodyguard nodded and took the key to open the door to Jin Wan's room. The crisp sound of the door being unlocked rang. In the next moment, Jin Wan forcefully twisted the door open and rushed out. She immediately saw Mo Xiaoze standing in the corridor with an ugly expression. Her entire face was slightly pale as she turned to look at Elder Brat. Are you hurt anywhere? Quickly tell grandfather. Elder Mo walked over shakily with the support of his walking stick. His eyes were filled with heartache. Jin Wan's lips were stained with blood from her own biting. She silently stared at the elder for a long time. After confirming that the elder's expression of anger and heartache was real and that he was not joking, she suppressed the surging emotions in her heart and tried to ask calmly, Grandfather, what you said earlier, is it true? Knowing that she had heard it, Elder Mo closed his eyes. It was clear that he did not want her to feel too uncomfortable. He softly comforted her. Don't worry. I believe in Jingshan. He will definitely be able to endure it. Mo Xiaoze's gaze was dark and cold. Father, you've already seen her. Can you be at ease now? Elder Mo turned back to scold him. Mo Xiaoze had already called for the bodyguard. Send the elder back to the Mo residence. You're only letting me go back? No, Jinwan has to leave with me. Elder Mo held onto his walking stick with one hand and quickly reached out with the other. He grabbed Jinwan's wrist and pulled her behind him. His aged and slightly hunched body shielded Jinwan behind him. Jinwan looked at the elder in front of her but could not say a word. Her eyes were cold as she stared at the expressionless Mo Xiaoze. Mo Xiaoze ignored Jinwan's gaze and said coldly, I let you see her to prove that she is indeed unharmed here, but before tomorrow morning she can't leave this place. She must stay under my watch. I can't give her a chance to ruin Jingshan and Shu Yan's good time. Jinwan's breathing was already trembling. She abruptly opened her mouth. You're using such a method to force him. Have you considered the consequences you'll face tomorrow? Mo Xiaoze laughed coldly. Consequences? Of course, the result will be you signing the divorce papers. Do you think that after tonight, Jingshan will still be yours? In both her lives, Jinwan had never been so angered that her entire body was trembling. If the person in front of her was not Mo Jingshan's father, she would definitely take a knife and chop him. Sensing her agitated emotions, Elder Mo pressed down on her hand. Brat, go back with grandfather first. She can't leave. Mo Xiaoze's eyes were filled with displeasure. She must leave with me. Elder Mo grabbed onto Jinwan's wrist, unwilling to leave her here. She's Jingshan's person. Even if Jingshan isn't here, on account that Jinwan calls me grandfather, I'll bring her safely back to the Mo family. Shu Yan can also call you grandfather. Mo Xiaoze's expression was cold. After tonight, Jingshan will know that the most suitable person for him is still in Shu Yan. Elder Mo's expression was cold. He still held onto Jinwan's wrist tightly, blocking her behind him. Every time the two bodyguards tried to approach, the elder would raise his walking stick and force them away. Elder Mo angrily shouted, Who dares to touch my granddaughter-in-law? Step over this old man's body first. Father. Mo Xiaoze's expression was dark. His voice was filled with warning and dissatisfaction. At your age, you shouldn't meddle in the matters of the younger generation. Elder Mo refused to move aside. Even though he was old, his gaze was still bright. It was not much different from his 50-year-old son. Mo Xiaoze watched this scene. After a moment, he furrowed his brows and impatiently waved his hand. All right. Let them go. Send the elder back to the Mo residence. Elder Mo's expression did not soften. He directly brought Jinwan, whose face was pale from anger, down the stairs. It's fine to bring Jinwan back to the Mo residence. Tomorrow morning, I'll have Jing Shen and Xu Yan go back to see you and sign the divorce papers with her. Mo Xiaoze stood at the foot of the stairs, speaking heavily. Elder Mo coldly harumphed and did not pay him any heed. Finally, Jinwan was brought into the car. Elder Mo sat in the front, his expression heavy as he called for the chauffeur to drive. He then turned back to comfort her. Child, don't worry. I believe in Jing Shen. With his willpower, he will definitely be able to overcome everything that happened tonight. He loves you and will protect your marriage. Other than you, he won't touch any other woman. Trust grandfather. Jinwan had suppressed her emotions for a long time. She tried her best to maintain her composure in front of the elder so that he would not worry too much. She softly asked, So, is he really locked up within Xu Yan? Elder Mo sighed softly. I know very well what kind of person Jing Shen's father is. Today, he ordered people to forcefully lock you up here. The matter on Jing Shen's side is most likely true. If I hadn't heard the news from Xiao Zhe's men, I wouldn't have been able to rush over to bring you away. Since you were able to find me, does that mean you know where Jing Shen is? Jinwan furrowed her brows. Elder Mo shook his head. Before I rushed over, I had already sent people out to investigate. However, Haiqing is so big. There are tens of thousands of four-star hotels and above. Right now, the only thing grandfather can do is to rescue you. Right now, I can't find Jing Shen, but you are Jing Shen's flesh and blood. I can't allow you to be harmed. Stop the car. Jinwan suddenly said, Grandfather, let me get off. Elder Mo was silent for a moment. It was not that he did not know her personality. After all, this was Jinwan and Mo Jingshen's marriage. She had things she wanted to say and do. He should not stop her. The car had just stopped when Jinwan abruptly pushed open the door and got off. She turned and ran back to the villa. Before the door closed, she rushed in. Mo Xiaoze heard the movements outside the door and turned back to look at Jinwan, who had actually returned. His cold gaze was calm as he looked at her. You've already been brought away by the elder. Why did you come back? Mo Xiaoze coldly asked. Chapter 126. Mo Xiaoze smiled coldly. You dare to threaten me? Your guts aren't small. Don't think that Jing Shen can protect you forever. Right now, he's already together with Xu Yan. I advise you to hurry up and prepare for a divorce. Although human nature has a side that is hard to control, even if it's controlled by the drug. Jinwan's gaze was firm. But I still believe in him. After speaking, without waiting for the two bodyguards to chase her out, Jinwan directly turned and walked out. Returning to Grandfather Mo's car, she asked in a calm voice, Grandfather, can you lend me your phone? Elder Mo did not say much, directly passing the phone to her. Jinwan picked it up and was about to call Mo Jingshen when she saw that there was an entire row of call records. There were more than 30 of Mo Jingshen's numbers. They were all numbers that Elder Mo had previously called him. There were so many of them, but not a single one was connected. Jinwan calmly dialed Mo Jingshen's number and then placed the phone by her ear. After a short beep, there was a cold and emotionless female voice. I'm sorry, the number you have dialed is temporarily unavailable. Sorry, Mo home. On the way back, it had already begun to rain. Right now, the rain was pouring outside. Jinwan sat on the bed. The pillow in her arms had already changed shape due to the strength she had used to hug it. The last time she stayed here was on Grandfather Mo's birthday. That night, Mo Jingshen said, Relax and be Mrs. Mo. You have me for everything. When she returned once again, sitting on this bed, all she could hear was the howling wind and heavy rain outside. She had called Mo Jingshen countless times, but none of them were able to connect. Elder Mo had sent out several batches of people, but they could not find any trace of him. Even the last location of Mo Jingshan's phone signal was checked, but there was no result. Time passed bit by bit. It was already 11 o'clock p.m. According to Mo Xiaozi, Mo Jingshan had been locked up within Shu Yen since 7 o'clock p.m. An entire 4 hours had passed. There was a knock on the door. Jin Wan sat on the bed and did not move. Finally, a helper pushed the door open. After taking a look, she turned and nodded at Elder Mo. Elder Mo's figure appeared by the door and walked in. "Brat, since you said you believe in Jingshan, you should wait for him to come back in peace." Elder Mo looked at her, gently comforting her. "I watched Jingshan grow up. I know very well what kind of person he is, how his character is, and how his self-control is." Jin Wan nodded silently and did not speak. She knew how it felt to be drugged. After all, she had experienced it before. How she had suffered that night and how her body reacted naturally. Those scenes and feelings were magnified infinitely in her mind and body. It had been 4 hours. If it was her, if she was locked in the same room with a man for 4 hours that night, she would definitely have a mental breakdown. If she really couldn't control herself in the end, she might hit her head on the wall and would rather die. What about Mo Jingshan? What would happen to him now? It was said that the drug would completely destroy a man's rationality, and he would only be able to rely on his biological instincts. Rumble, the deafening thunder sounded again, and a bolt of lightning flashed across the dark night sky. The dazzling light illuminated the front yard of the Mo mansion, but it was instantly drowned in the endless darkness. Chapter 127. At this time, why would there be a car coming? Elder Mo's eyes were suddenly filled with hope. He turned back and urged, "Quickly go take a look. Has Jingshan returned?" The moment the elder spoke, Jin Wan was already one step ahead of everyone else and ran out first. Brat, why didn't you bring an umbrella? Quickly hold an umbrella for her. Don't get wet." Elder Mo chased after her with his walking stick, but he could not catch up to Jin Wan's speed. He watched as Jin Wan ignored the pouring rain and rushed out the door. The helper and butler rushed out with umbrellas. Jin Wan did not notice how cold and wet she was. She only stared at the car lights and ran over. However, when she approached, she realized that the car was not Mo Jingshan's but a taxi. Her footsteps paused. She stood in the rain. The night lights on both sides of the Mo family's courtyard swayed slightly under the rain. The car door opened. The moment she saw Shu Yen's figure standing by the car, Jin Wan's brows instantly froze. And Shu Yen came over with an umbrella after alighting. She raised her eyes to see Jin Wan, and her footsteps paused. She then turned to see the helper and butler come over to hold the umbrella over Jin Wan's head. However, at this time, Jin Wan's entire body was already drenched. And Shu Yen approached Jin Wan. Through the curtain of rain, she softly said, "Mrs. Mo, I'm very sorry." Jin Wan stood there, watching Shu Yen, who came alone. From start to finish, she did not see Mo Jingshan's figure. Her expression was calm, but it was as though she was silently suppressing her emotions. Her gaze was cold, and her tone was low and slow. "What did you do? Are you going to apologize to me?" And Shu Yen lowered her eyes, holding onto the umbrella. "The rain is so heavy. Let's go in and talk." "That's right, madam. Your hands are all wet. Quickly go back and change." The helper held the umbrella for Jin Wan while reaching out to pull her back. Jin Wan silently stared at Shu Yen. She saw a flash of emotion in Shu Yen's eyes and immediately seemed to understand something. She did not speak further and allowed the helpers to drag her back into the villa. The old man had just taken a few steps behind them with an umbrella. Seeing that they were about to enter, he hurriedly asked the servant to open both doors of the villa and let them in quickly. The helper deftly brought 2 thick blankets over to cover Jin Wan. And Shu Yen had been holding the umbrella and was not drenched. She placed the umbrella down the moment she entered. "Shu Yen? How could it be you? What's going on with you guys today?" Elder Mo saw that Shu Yen was dressed neatly and was not locked in a room like Mo Xiaozi had said. "Grandpa, I'm sorry. I should have come earlier, but because there were spies around, I couldn't avoid them. That's why I came so late." And Shu Yen said to Elder Mo apologetically, I can explain tonight's situation to you, but can I speak to Mrs. Mo alone for a few words first? Elder Mo furrowed his brows, turning to look at Jinwan, whose head and face were drenched in rain. Jinwan calmly looked at Shuyen, her voice cold. What do you want to say? And Shuyen directly walked toward her, using her gaze to indicate for Jinwan to go to the side to speak. Jinwan did not speak, turning to walk to the first floor of the villa near the blue and white porcelain vase. And Shuyen stood by her side. When she spoke, her voice was so soft that only Jinwan could hear. To be honest, to me, tonight is indeed a rare opportunity. I've liked Seo Mo for many years. Ever since I was a teenager, my father and Uncle Mo promised me that they would definitely let me marry him. Because the autumn rain was too cold, Jinwan's face and lips were pale from the cold. However, her gaze was cold and bright. So, for Missin to come here at this time, it shouldn't be as simple as expressing your stance. And Shuyen smiled mildly, but her smile was somewhat bitter. The reason I like Mo is because I really like him too much, and I look up to this man too much. That's why I can't use such a method to forcefully keep him. Jinwan silently raised her brows. Liking was possessive, while love was not easily profane. It was as though it was only at this moment that Jinwan truly felt Shuyen's seriousness toward Mo Jingshan. And Shuyen's tone was mild and unhurried. I've always known about today's plan. Although Uncle Mo's methods were a little overboard, I initially tacitly agreed and accepted it. However, at the most crucial moment, I gave up. In order to avoid Uncle Mo's spies, I gave the cup of coffee that they gave me to another female secretary who was traveling with me. The coffee contained something similar to a knockout drug, something that would cause a person to faint for more than 10 hours. After she fainted, I exchanged clothes with her. The people Uncle Mo sent were not particularly familiar with me, so they directly brought the unconscious female secretary away and sent her to the designated room. Jinwan glanced at her. Since you agreed to this plan from the start, why did you still drug yourself? And Shuyen chuckled lightly. It should be easy for you to figure out the reason. Jinwan coldly smiled. Indeed. And Shuyen was a shrewd woman. If she wanted to use this opportunity to be together with Mo Jingshan, she would definitely leave a way out for herself. If she was also drugged, she could logically become the innocent party. Actually, if it was a fair competition, I might not lose to you. Even if I lose because of Seo Mo's feelings for you, and not because of you, Jinwan, and Shuyen softly emphasized. Jinwan indifferently curved her lips. Missin, from the moment you agreed to cooperate with this plan, you had already lost. And Shuyen's expression faltered. The trace of distress in her eyes did not escape Jinwan's eyes. As long as you had the slightest chance of winning, you would never agree to such a lowly and despicable plan. The coldness in Jinwan's eyes surged. In the end, what woke you up was not because of how much you love Mo Jingshan, but because you understand him too well. You knew that such an outcome would not only fail to obtain him, but it would also bring about unimaginable consequences. And Shuyen smiled. Mrs. Mo, you really aren't like the rumors. Perhaps I've really underestimated you. I don't need your overestimation. Jinwan dragged out her words. Right now, it is Miss Anne's sobriety that has truly saved your life. You know very well that Mo Jingshan is not someone who can be easily manipulated or threatened by others. This step of yours is to protect yourself. And Shuyen suddenly stared at her, speaking in a low voice. Right now, your words are so rude. Aren't you afraid that I'll just walk away right now and continue hiding Seo Mo's whereabouts? Chapter 128. Even though the rain on Jinwan's head and body made her look extremely wretched, she was still so calm that Shuyen could not help but want to see through her soul. She wanted to see how this Jinwan, who usually did not show any sharpness, was different from others. However, her words had already been pointed out by Jinwan. And Shuyen indeed had no way of rebutting her words. Tonight, if you haven't found your side and continue to stand by Director Mo's side, I'm not sure what the consequences will be, but I'm sure you won't be able to bear it. Jinwan's tone was calm. Only by helping me can you save yourself and the family from this disaster. Missin, you've already made up your mind before coming here. Now, you want to use leaving to threaten me? And Shuyan's complexion was no longer as good as before. However, she forced a smile on her lips. At a time like this, you can still be so clear-headed. I really wonder if you even love him. The more uncertain the situation, the more clear-headed I should be, especially when facing you, Missin. If I still lose my composure, then I'm afraid I really am not worthy of the 3 words, Mrs. M. Jinwan's expression was calm, her tone mild. Elder Mo could not hear what they were talking about from the other side. Right now, he was so anxious that he directly walked over, wanting to ask what exactly was going on. Hearing the elder's movements, Shuyan did not waste any more time. She softly said, I don't know how long that female secretary will be unconscious for, but she has indeed been sent into that room. After all, it has already been over 4 hours. This kind of torture, I don't know how much longer So Mo can endure. Jinwan finally furrowed her brows and looked toward her. He's in the Wanli Xingchen Hotel on Bin Hai Road, 33rd floor, room 3320. However, the entire 33rd floor is guarded by Uncle Mo's people. It's impossible to directly enter that floor. I can only bring my words to this point. Think of a way yourself. With that, Shuyan turned to face the approaching elder. Grandfather, tonight's matter has startled you. I'm really sorry. Uncle Mo has always been a very domineering person. If he wants to do something, no one will easily stop him. You must know his temper very well. Afterward, Shuyan pulled Elder Mo to the side to continue talking. Jinwan did not walk over. She only watched the lightning, thunder, and storm outside the window. Earlier, Shuyan's words reminded Jinwan that although Elder Mo was powerful in High City, the majority of Shine Group and the Mo family's power was in Mo Shaoza's hands. Even if he was not suppressed by Elder Mo in name, if Mo Shaoza really feared the Elder's power, he would not have done such a thing tonight. If Grandfather Mo sent someone to the hotel right now, he might not be able to bring Mo Jingshan out in time. On the other hand, it was very likely that Grandfather Mo would cut off all ties with his biological son, Mo Shaoza. Furthermore, there might even be people who wanted to take advantage of the situation and cause internal strife in the Mo family. 15 minutes later, Jinwan returned to her room to dry her hair, changed her clothes, and went out. Ignoring the Mo family's obstruction, she drove straight out of the Mo family's gate. Before she left, she only left one sentence for Grandfather. Grandfather, I'm going to bring Jingshan back. Wait for me. Bin Hai Road, Wanli Xingchen Hotel. This was a newly opened 7-star hotel in High City. It had only been opened for less than a month and had yet to be entered into High City's website. If one wanted to check, it would be easy to overlook the existence of this new hotel. Because it had just opened, the security inside and outside of the hotel were still under construction and could not be considered perfect. Also, because the hotel was too expensive and was located in this area of Bin Hai Road, there were not many people staying in the hotel. There were also not many staff in the hotel. Jinwan drove over and tossed the car keys to the security guard outside the door. She took her bag and walked into the main entrance of the hotel. The feeling she gave off did not seem like she had come with a motive. She was dignified, gentle, and calm, appearing like a guest who had no choice but to stay in this hotel for the night due to the heavy rain. Her appearance at this moment did not arouse the suspicion of the staff. After handing over her identification, Jinwan stood at the front desk and said, "This is a Sea View hotel, right? Can you give me a room on a higher floor? This way, the view from the balcony will be better. The price doesn't matter. It's best if it's above the 30th floor." "I'm sorry, miss. Tonight, the 31st to 35th floors have all been booked. Only the 30th floor and below can be checked in. Is room 3016 okay?" "It's on the 30th floor," the lady at the front desk asked politely. Jinwan smiled mildly and nodded. "Sure. All right. This is the room card for room 3016. Please keep it well." After receiving the room card, Jinwan quickly walked into the elevator. She did not look at anyone and quickly went upstairs to her room. After entering and closing the door, Jinwan flung her bag aside and rushed to the window. Ignoring the raging storm outside, she opened the floor-to-ceiling windows on the balcony and walked out. She raised her head to look in the direction of the 33rd floor. Earlier on, she had looked carefully on this floor. Room 3020 was only 2 doors away from her room 3016. Room 3320, where Mo Jingshan was now, was in the room on the right. Jinwan stared up and gripped the balcony railing tightly. She tested the firmness of the railing and then turned back to take out a pair of sneakers from her bag. She changed out of the high heels on her feet and put on the sneakers, tying the laces tightly. Finally, she threw her bag on the bed and only carried the room card with her. She turned back to the balcony and jumped up with force. She carefully stepped on the railing on the balcony and at the same time, shifted her gaze to the outdoor air conditioner half a meter above her. She tried to step on it. Very good. The outdoor air conditioner was installed very firmly. There was even a very sturdy square railing around it. Jinwan did not dare to look down. After all, the height of the 30th floor was something she had never dared to challenge in her 2 lives. She hardened her heart and gripped the railing on the outside of the air conditioner to step up. She then carefully stepped on the firewall and metal railing necessary for high-rise buildings. Step by step, the 31st floor, the 32nd floor, the 33rd floor. In room 3320, the shower head was turned off. Mo Jingshan, who had taken dozens of cold showers, put on his shirt and walked out of the bathroom. His dark, boundless eyes coldly glanced at the unconscious woman on the bed. A murderous aura spread around him. Mo Jingshan casually threw the blanket on the bed over the woman, covering her from head to toe. When he turned, he suddenly heard strange movements outside the window. Chapter 129. Then, a rain-drenched head popped out from the other side of the balcony. Mo Jingshan raised his brows and hurriedly walked over. With a schwa sound, he opened the floor-to-ceiling window. Outside the window, the wind and rain intertwined. At that moment, the curtains fluttered dreamily. Jinwan's figure gradually became clear on the balcony. Finally, the woman gritted her teeth and jumped in from the railing. However, because of the rain, her legs were already cramping. The moment she jumped down, she fell to the ground. She hissed in pain and rubbed her cramping calf while inadvertently raising her eyes to look inside. At first glance, she saw Mo Jingshan in front of the window. Before she could clearly see the man's expression, Jinwan subconsciously stood up with a whoosh. However, the pain in her legs made her fall forward the moment she stood up and took a step forward. This time, she simply threw herself into the man's arms. For the first time in his life, Mo Jingshan was so shocked that he didn't move for a long time. The weight in his arms brought him back to himself. He subconsciously held the little woman who threw herself into the cold rain and air. Jinwan's face bumped hard against his chest and she gave a low, muffled moan. Ooh! Outside the window, thunder rumbled. Mo Jingshan felt the coldness from Jinwan's body. Without saying a word, he closed the window and then pushed the woman in his arms away from him. He lowered his eyes and stared at her as though he was looking at a monster. He looked at her from top to bottom and saw a bloody scratch on her face. "How did you come up?" he asked in a low voice, but his hand had already touched her cold face. His cold eyes showed no emotion. Instead, he was so angry that he seemed to want to throw her down from the 33rd floor. Jinwan didn't explain. She was cold, but Mo Jingshan's body was too hot. She endured the terrible pain in her legs and clutched his shirt tightly. Feeling the heat from his body, she quickly looked around the room. Seeing the bulging quilt on the bed, she didn't hesitate to lift the quilt to see if the woman was wearing clothes. However, when she was about to move, her calf ached so much that she grimaced in pain and almost fell to the ground. If Mo Jingshan hadn't held her up, she would have fallen down. It hurts. Seeing that she was in so much pain that her expression was about to contort, Mo Jingshan's cold expression softened slightly. He looked at her leg. "Where does it hurt?" "Cramp my left calf." Jinwan's face was pale as she pointed at her own calf. "Be gentler, it hurts." Mo Jingshan touched the area on her calf that was cramping. His gaze darkened and he picked her up by the waist. He entered the bathroom, adjusted the water temperature, and carried Jinwan to sit by the bathtub. He poured the warm water on her legs, warmed her legs with one hand, and used the other to rub the cramps on her calf. He rubbed it lightly and heavily. After about 2 minutes, Jinwan's expression finally eased, and her legs were no longer stiff. She moved slightly in his arms. "Are you done?" he asked. His eyes were still cold, but his hands were still gentle as he massaged her. Jinwan nodded hard and glanced out of the bathroom. From this angle, she could not see the big bump under the blankets. She then saw Emo Jingshin's slightly messy but elegant shirt and trousers. After hesitating for 2 seconds, she reached out to touch his face. Emo Jingshin stiffened because of her movement. His gaze deepened, and he pressed her hand down. "Don't move." He poured the hot water from the top of her head down, trying to warm her up as soon as possible. Jinwan could see that he was not feeling well. Her eyes reddened, and she threw herself into his arms without a care. When he was caught off guard and took 2 steps back, she hugged his neck tightly and did not let go. She whispered by his ear, "Was there a woman on the bed earlier?" Emo Jingshin raised his hand and stroked her wet long hair. He said hoarsely, There was no time to explain what had happened. Jinwan hugged him even tighter. "Did you touch her?" "No," he answered without hesitation. Although the man's voice was hoarse, it was much more sober than Jinwan had imagined. The heavy stone in Jinwan's heart was immediately lifted. She seemed to finally be able to relax. She leaned into his arms as though she had lost all her strength. She allowed the man to hold her and sit by the bathtub. She allowed him to pour the warm water on her body and warm her up bit by bit. "I knew it." Jinwan could no longer hold back her emotions. She sobbed and hugged him. "I knew it. I knew it." Emo Jingshin could hear that the little woman was crying. It seemed like she had finally relaxed but was still afraid. He put down the shower head and hugged her. The strong heat from his body was transmitted to hers. The cold and hot temperatures matched each other perfectly in this rainy night. "The door to this room can't be opened. There are people guarding outside, aren't there?" Jinwan asked, choking. Emo Jingshin's voice was still hoarse. Jinwan sniffled and suddenly sat up from his arms. She looked at him with red eyes. "Are you feeling terrible right now? How did you endure it for so many hours?" It was clear that she knew everything. Emo Jingshin did not say more. He rubbed her head comfortingly and said calmly, "I'm fine." "You're still saying you're fine? Right now, your temperature is even higher than a normal person's when they have a fever." Jinwan put her hand on his chest and touched it. She heard the man groan softly because of her touch and his eyes darkened. She leaned over and kissed the corner of his lips. Although her eyes were a little red, they were bright. She said eagerly, "Then don't hold back now. You can do whatever you want now." Emo Jingshin chuckled softly and kissed her lips. He said hoarsely, "Silly girl, this place is not suitable." "Why is it not suitable? Weren't you drugged? You're definitely not allowed to touch women outside. Now that I'm here, what are you enduring? This is the first time I've taken the initiative. You're actually not giving me any face." Jinwan glared at him and reached out to undo his shirt. Emo Jingshin pressed her hand down. Earlier, he could at least endure it. But now that Jinwan was suddenly here, and her entire body was wet as she pressed against him, not to mention being drugged, even if it was a normal day, he might not be able to endure her teasing. He pressed her into his embrace, saying hoarsely, "Not here. There are surveillance cameras." Jinwan's expression stiffened. She stared at him in disbelief and rushed to move away from his embrace. However, Emo Jingshin held her tightly and did not allow her to move. He warned hoarsely, "Be obedient. Don't move." Chapter 130. "Then, if I'm in your arms right now, won't you feel even more uncomfortable?" Jinwan carefully maintained a distance from him. Even so, she could still feel the shocking heat from his body. What kind of terrifying self-control did Emo Jingshin have? Even in such a situation, he could still endure it. "With your current state, there's no difference to me whether you're standing there or sitting in my arms." Mo Jingshin held her waist, breathing in the light scent of rainwater on her body. Why don't you let me hold you for a while? Jinwan sat in his arms unmoving. However, as he was tormented, her heart did not feel good either. The man held her just like that, pressing his head against her snow-white neck. His burning kiss landed on her collarbone, causing her body to tremble. Feeling her sensitive reaction, Mo Jingshin tightened even more. He closed his eyes to avoid looking at her, choosing to chat to distract himself. He asked, "How did you know I was here?" And Shu Yan went to the Mo family, Jinwan answered honestly. Jinwan answered truthfully. She said that although she wanted to be with you, she didn't want to do it in this way, so the person who was sent to your room tonight was not her, but another female secretary who was with her. Jinwan did not need to lie, nor did she need to defame Shu Yan. After all, Shu Yan's motive was something that even she could sense. It was impossible for Mo Jingshin not to know. As expected, after hearing these words, Mo Jingshin opened his eyes. His gaze turned colder, and his grip on Jinwan tightened. He said softly, "So, earlier on, you climbed up from below?" Although he was softly asking by her ear, his voice carried a hint of danger. Jinwan made a sound, thinking of how to phrase her words so that he would not be angry. "I was too anxious. I was afraid that you would lose your chastity, so I'm asking if you climbed up from below." Mo Jingshin's tone became colder. He lowered his eyes to stare into her eyes. Jinwan recalled the frightening experience earlier. When she reached the 32nd floor, because the rain was too slippery, she almost fell down. She did not have any protective measures on her. The fact that she was able to climb up with her life was really a blessing from the heavens. "I didn't climb very high. From the 30th floor, I only climbed 3 floors, she softly said without much confidence. "Third floor?" Mo Jingshin's gaze turned cold inch by inch. His tone carried obvious anger and reprimand. "Do you know which floor this is? Firemen need ladders and ropes to climb a building, and you just climbed up like that? Are you tired of living? But the area between the 31st floor and the 35th floor is locked down. I have no other choice. Besides, aren't I fine now?" Jinwan reached out to tug on the sleeve of his shirt. She tugged on it gently and whispered, "I'm lucky. I'll be fine." At this time, Mo Jingshin's eyes were frighteningly deep. He stared at the bruise on her face and suddenly shook her hand off. Jinwan paused and thought he was really angry. She rushed to stand up, but the man went out and turned the dim light in the bathroom into the brightest one. The moment the light came on, she narrowed her eyes, and in an instant, he had returned to the bathroom. Without waiting for her to stand up, Mo Jingshin expressionlessly held her calf that was no longer cramping. He lifted it up, and before Jinwan could cry out in alarm, he had already pulled up her pants. When he saw the red marks on her knees and legs caused by the sharp edges of the air conditioner, his gaze turned even colder. "I'm really fine. These are just scratches on the surface of my skin." Mo Jingshin did not say a word as he pulled up her sleeves again. He saw the bruise on her wrist and the red marks on her elbows that were even more serious than those on her legs. He then turned her hands over and saw her swollen fingers and bruised palms. Jinwan's gaze faltered. She tried to retract her hand but was held tightly by the man. "I'm really fine. Jinwan wanted to speak but saw that Mo Jingshin's gaze was frighteningly heavy. She pursed her lips and suddenly smiled to say, "Thankfully, the security in this hotel isn't that good. Otherwise, I would have been discovered the moment I climbed out. The distance between each floor isn't too far, and there are fixed air conditioners in the middle as stairs. In fact, it's really very safe. I'm not even afraid, so you don't have to." Before she could finish speaking, Mo Jingshin suddenly held the back of her head and pressed her heavily into his embrace. It was very, very heavy. For a moment, she could not speak. She felt as though she was being pressed into his body. The man did not say a word and only held her. Jinwan gradually calmed down. She no longer tried to explain or make a sound. She quietly allowed him to hold her, pressed her face against his burning neck, and closed her eyes. It had been a thrilling night. No matter what, at least they did not lose each other. That was enough. Earlier, when she climbed up from the 30th floor, she did not think about anything else. Her only thought was to quickly find him and see him. Even if her body was smashed into pieces, she would not give up the slightest chance to help him. Even though she had already calmed down, she did not regret it. In his embrace, Jin-won closed her eyes. Her hand climbed up to his well-defined back and hugged his back. However, due to the heat from his body, she opened her eyes and asked softly in his embrace, "Do you want to soak in cold water?" Mo Jingshan hugged her and did not let go. He gently kissed the top of her head. "With you here, it's useless even if you put me in an ice cellar." "Then what should we do? Why don't we turn off the lights? The surveillance cameras shouldn't be able to capture anything." Mo Jingshan did not speak. Could it be that the surveillance cameras have night vision? Jin-won suddenly raised her head to look at him. He looked at her, silently agreeing. Mo Xiaoza was too ruthless. Although he would not go so far as to specially watch the surveillance footage of his son sleeping with a woman, the reason he installed a camera in the room was most likely to use the surveillance footage as evidence if Mo Jingshan rejected him in the future. Thus, night vision cameras were definitely used. Then what should we do? Jin-won felt that he was even hotter than before. Mo Jingshan's brows moved. He lowered his eyes to look at her and suddenly smiled. Right now, his shirt was slightly disheveled, and his gaze was unusually dark. There was a sense of decadence and attractiveness to him. "It's all right. The sky is about to brighten. This type of drug will usually wear off after 12 hours. It's only 1 in the morning. Jin-won lowered her head and suddenly raised her hand. "Why don't I use my hand to help you?" Chapter 131. The man's voice was hoarse and seductive. Jin-won could barely stand it. Furthermore, right now, he was in such extreme torment, Jin-won thought he was embarrassed. She had already thrown caution to the wind. What was there to be embarrassed about? She reached out to tug on the belt hidden under his shirt. Mo Jingshan abruptly pressed down on her hand. His gaze was heavy and filled with indescribable darkness and profoundness as he stared at this little woman who did not know life from death. The surveillance cameras have blind spots. Let's find a corner where the cameras can't capture us. Jin-won did not wish to see him suffer so silently. She took the initiative to look back at the bathroom and several places around the bathtub. After the lights are turned off, there's also the door. It definitely won't capture us. As she spoke, she took a step back toward the bathroom door. Her hand was still tightly gripping the corner of his shirt, preventing him from moving away. The moment Jin-won hid behind the door, Mo Jingshan sighed softly. He did not allow her to undo his belt but instead held her wrist, leaning down to kiss her harshly on the lips. The kiss was deep and heavy, as though he wanted to skin her alive. In the end, he forcefully pressed down Jin-won's disobedient hand that was moving back and forth on his body. He gave a low, muffled snort, speaking through gritted teeth. "Do you want me to die?" Jin-won's hand was restrained by him and could not move. She could only stare at him helplessly and say with incomparable sincerity, "It's just using my hand. I really know how to do it. In the past, Xia Tian and I secretly watched that kind of movie." Seeing Mo Jingshan's raised brows, Jin-won immediately revealed an excited expression. "It's rare for me to have such an active opportunity. Don't you cherish it?" "Of course I have to cherish it." Mo Jingshan chuckled softly but still held her wrist. "Although the wound on your palm is not deep, it was scratched by those metal edges when you climbed up. This kind of injury requires a tetanus shot. Now that you've been soaked in the rain, it's already red and swollen." As he spoke, he comforted her, gently kissing her forehead. "I can't take the risk of letting your wound get infected. It'll be over after one night. It's all right." At this moment, Jin-won deeply regretted that she had prepared everything else but forgot to prepare a pair of anti-abrasion and scratch-resistant rubber gloves when climbing up. She looked at her red and swollen palms for a while, and from time to time, some blood would flow out from the thin wounds. She sat there with furrowed brows. Mo Jingshan thought she was thinking about the wound on her palm, but in the next moment, Jinwan's words almost caused the composure he had maintained for more than 20 years to collapse. How about I try it with my mouth? Seeing that the man suddenly fell silent, Jinwan actually felt a little embarrassed. After all, she had seen a lot of big movies in the next 10 years. Although she had never done it before, she was not too unfamiliar with it. Then I'll go turn off the bathroom lights. Jinwan stood up and was about to walk around the man in front of her to turn off the lights outside the bathroom. However, the moment she got up, her wrist suddenly tightened. The man pressed her against the wall and buried his burning face in her neck. He hugged her tightly and said in an unbelievably hoarse voice, "If you really want to try, I'll give you the chance any time after we leave this place." Jinwan's face instantly flushed red. "Who said I wanted to try? I just saw that you were in too much pain," Mo Jingshan chuckled hoarsely, hugging her. "There's no need. Just hold me like this. Stand here and don't move." "Are you sure that just a hug is enough?" His voice was still low and hoarse. "But I feel like you're in a lot of pain." He did not speak again, hugging her tightly. Jinwan leaned against the wall, allowing the man's tense body to press against hers. There was no gap between their bodies, and his body temperature gradually warmed her up. Jinwan obediently raised her hands to hug his back, pressing her face against his chest. She closed her eyes and listened to the man's heart that was not as steady and calm as usual. But even so, even though Mo Jingshan's short black hair was slightly messy, he was still incomparably handsome. Even though his shirt and pants were half-soaked by her, he still possessed his unique charm of calmness and self-control. In comparison, Jinwan, who had climbed up from the 30th floor with no regard for her life, was completely soaked. There were still some traces of blood on her clothes, and there were small red marks on her face. She looked unbelievably wretched. She did not expect that even at this stage, she was still more wretched than him. They hugged for a long time, so long that Jinwan felt as though she was about to be burned by the heat of his embrace. She had only just begun to relax for the night when she leaned against his chest and almost fell asleep. All of a sudden, the man said in a low and hoarse voice, "Go out first. Let me take a shower." Jinwan opened her eyes. She was about to fall asleep, but she did not immediately wake up. She asked in a daze, "Is it cold water?" Jinwan nodded and cooperatively turned to walk out of the bathroom. In the end, a dry towel was suddenly tossed over her head. "It's not convenient to take off your clothes here. Your body is still wet. Wrap the towel around yourself." Jinwan nodded again, hugging the towel as she walked out. The consequence of relaxing was that she really wanted to sleep. She wrapped the towel around her body and subconsciously wanted to lie down on the bed or the sofa for a while. However, as soon as she got close to the bed, she saw the big bulge under the blanket, and the sleepiness in her head instantly disappeared. She composed herself and turned on the dim wall lamp at the head of the bed. She slowly reached out and lifted the quilt. Sure enough, she saw a young woman lying there quietly. Her breathing was steady, and she had been sleeping so peacefully in this situation. As expected, she had been drugged. Although he didn't know how long the woman on the bed was going to sleep for, her clothes were still intact, and there was nothing that shouldn't be exposed. The quilt was probably thrown over by Mo Jingshan, and even her face was not exposed. After all, she was a secretary of the Mo Corporation. If she had not had coffee with An Shuyen, she would not have been sent to the big boss for no reason. After all, she was an innocent person. Jinwan gently covered her with the quilt again. Although her face was covered, she still left a gap at the edge of the quilt to prevent her from suffocating. Outside the window, the rain was still falling, but it was lighter than before, and the thunder was farther away. Jinwan stood by the window, looking at the sea not far away. Even now, she did not dare to look down from this angle. From the height of the 33rd floor, she could not even see the flower beds downstairs clearly. The passing cars were all fingernail-sized shadows. The word "love" was indeed a superstition of the right time and the right place. It would inexplicably give people fearless courage and even disregard life and death. Chapter 132. The few hours before daybreak were similarly torturous for Jinwan. The two of them slept on the sofa. Mo Jingshan held Jinwan in his arms. Jinwan slept soundly in his arms, but she could vaguely feel that his body was unusually hot. It was not until 4 or 5 in the morning when the sky gradually brightened. Jinwan slept and opened her eyes to look at the dark room. At the same time, she felt that Mo Jingshan had finally fallen asleep. Although his body temperature was slightly hotter than usual, it was not as severe as last night. He must have endured the most difficult part and finally fell asleep from exhaustion. Jinwan did not move as she leaned against his chest. She listened to his heartbeat and slowly raised her hands to hug his neck, closing her eyes. She did not know if the sleeping man had woken up or if it was out of instinct, but he hugged Jinwan tighter. A gentle kiss landed on the top of her head. It appeared to be an unintentional kiss, but it caused Jinwan to uncontrollably smile in his arms. Jinwan slept for another 2 hours. When she opened her eyes, the sky had already brightened. She raised her head and saw that Mo Jingshan had finally fallen into a deeper sleep. His body temperature had also completely dropped. She released a sigh of relief and moved gently and slowly out of his embrace. She then picked up his coat and covered his body. She tiptoed to the bedside and pulled open the curtains. She looked at the color of the sky. Although there was a thunderstorm last night, the sun was shining brightly this morning. It seemed like it was already past 7 in the morning. At this moment, footsteps approached from outside the door. Jinwan vigilantly turned around. When she clearly heard that it was Elder Mo's voice, she directly walked to the door. "You sure hid Jingshan well? No wonder the people I sent out couldn't find the right place." Elder Mo angrily scolded as he walked by the door. "Brat, you can now be considered a schemer." Mo Xiao's voice rang from outside the door. "In front of father, I'm afraid I can't bear these words." Elder Mo coldly snorted. "What you can't calculate is the human heart. Just this time, you still lost in the end. You sure are confident in Jingshan's self-control. Since you insisted on coming here so early in the morning, I won't keep you in suspense. After this door is opened, you'd better face reality and let Xu Yan marry over. That way, I won't have to worry about this." Mo Xiao's tone was filled with certainty. Elder Mo chuckled. "Then go ahead and try opening the door." Jinwan leaned against the door and listened to the conversation outside. When she heard the brief sound of a room card being swiped, her brows furrowed and she reached out to open the door from the inside. Mo Xiao's face originally had a hint of a cold smile. That kind of expression really matched Elder Mo's words. It had the flavor of a scheming and far-sighted person. However, the moment Jinwan's figure abruptly appeared in the room, Mo Xiao's expression instantly stiffened. He quickly turned cold as he stared at her coldly. "Why are you here?" Jinwan smiled at him coldly. "Good morning, Chairman." Mo Xiaoza glared at her with an ugly expression. He abruptly wanted to enter the door to check on the situation inside, but Jinwan stood in front of the door and did not move aside. A man in his 50s, who was also Mo Jingshan's father, would not push her away. Elder Mo walked over with his walking stick, secretly giving Jinwan a thumbs up. His eyes were filled with gratification and praise. He then calmly smiled at Mo Xiaoza, whose expression was extremely ugly. "How is it? If I say you've lost, then you've lost. Your old man is still your old man after all. When it comes to the matter of my granddaughter-in-law, you can't waver." "How did you find it?" After all, Mo Xiaoza was someone who had seen wind and rain. After a moment, his expression darkened, and he coldly questioned Jinwan. Jinwan smiled mildly. "It doesn't matter how you found me. What's important is that I was with Jingshan last night." Mo Xiaoza narrowed his eyes. Without waiting for him to speak, Elder Mo chimed in from the side. "Gee brat, you've already married in for so long. Why are you still calling him Chairman Mo? Grandfather is here to support you. He's Jingshan's father. It's time for you to change the way you address him." Mo Xiao's expression was still very dark. The scene he expected to see did not happen. Instead, he was beaten up by Elder Jinwan this early in the morning. His face had been completely thrown away, and his gaze was dark and filled with anger. Jinwan hesitated for a moment, but she still had to give Grandfather Mo some face. She smiled slightly. The Emo Xiaoza coldly watched her. I'm afraid I can't accept Miss G calling me Dad. If you want to call me that, then call me that. After all, you won't be able to call me that for long. Jinwan smiled nonchalantly. She did not lose her composure because of the coldness and threat in his words. She continued to stand in front of the door, refusing to let him in. Putting aside the fact that the unconscious woman inside was innocent and could not be implicated or seen by him, Emo Jingshan had stayed up all night and finally fell asleep at daybreak. He should at least be allowed to sleep a little longer. Elder Emo glared at Emo Xiaoza with a displeased expression. G Brat has already given you enough face by calling you that. Can't you keep your stubborn temper in check? Jingshan's marriage is his own choice. Even if you're his father, you have no right to criticize him. This G Brat has long belonged to the Mo family. Besides, she's still a 20-year-old child. Can't you speak nicely to her? Do you have to be so unreasonable? Elder Mo continued, as the saying goes, it's better to tear down a temple than to ruin a marriage. You're not young anymore. After staying in America for so long, have you forgotten how to write the word respect? How can you be so overbearing? Jingshan's future belongs to America and Shine, Emo Xiaoza coldly said. I don't wish to repeat myself. Xu Yan is the most suitable candidate. How isn't Xu Yan suitable? In terms of family background, Jinwan is not much worse off than Xu Yan. It's just that the Ji family is in Haicheng. In the future, if Jingshan returns to America to take over Shine, Jinwan's position by his side might not necessarily be worse than in Xu Yan's. You haven't even compared them, and you're already denying Jinwan. You're really a stubborn old man. Being scolded by his 80-year-old father as a stubborn old man, Emo Xiaoza's expression darkened. He then coldly stared at Jinwan. Emo Xiaoza suddenly ordered the bodyguard behind him, pull her away. The bodyguard immediately rushed forward. Elder Emo saw this and fiercely slammed his walking stick against the ground, angrily saying, Who dares to touch my granddaughter-in-law? Emo Xiaoza coldly stared at the elder, coldly ordering, Are you all deaf? Pull this woman away. Enough. Suddenly, a clear voice rang from behind Jinwan. Chapter 133. Emo Jingshan stood there expressionlessly. His clear voice carried a biting chill. His gaze was cold and heavy as he indifferently glanced over. The two bodyguards who were about to reach out to pull Jinwan broke out in cold sweat under Emo Jingshan's intense gaze. They did not dare to touch her again. Regardless of whether it was the room or the entire 33rd floor of the hotel, it was so quiet that one could hear a pin drop. This was not the first time Jinwan had seen Emo Jingshan so cold, but his bone-chilling gaze still caused her to feel a chill down her spine. Emo Jingshan's gaze coldly swept past them. Who dares to touch her? So Emo, we were just following Director Mo's orders. He was worried about your condition in the room, so he asked us to. The two bodyguards explained with trembling expressions. Emo Jingshan's gaze was sharp and cold. His gaze landed on one of them, and his lips curved into a mocking smile. Following orders? Jinwan stood by the door, silently standing there. From the start, she knew that Emo Xiaoza was completely unable to control Emo Jingshan. Otherwise, he would not have used such forceful methods. Suma Xiao's actions last night pushed Emo Jingshan further and further away. She could feel it from Emo Jingshan's current attitude. In his eyes, there was no longer this so-called father. Cold and chilling, Emo Jingshan approached Jinwan's side. He lowered his gaze to look at her small face that did not have the slightest hint of fear, and held her hand. Seeing Emo Jingshan's actions as he approached the door, Emo Xiaoza's expression instantly turned cold. His eyes were filled with displeasure. Jinwan thought that Emo Jingshan was using this method to appease her. She gently moved the hand he was holding, her fingers scraping against his palm in an attempt to ease the overly tense atmosphere. However, in the next moment, she was suddenly pulled over by a force. Her entire body fell into Emo Jingshan's embrace, and she lost her footing. Emo Jingshan's strong arms held her like this, as though announcing his ownership of her. He calmly pressed her against his chest. Mo Jingshan's cold and firm voice brushed past her head. Jinwan is my wife. With me around, no one can shake her identity as Mrs. Mo. Mo Xiao's gaze was cold. Where is Xu Yan? She wasn't with you last night? At this moment, a gentle voice came from the elevator not far away. Uncle Mo, I'm very sorry. Mo Xiaoza suddenly turned around and looked at Xu Yan. The answer was self-evident. Mo Xiaoza's gaze was dark and ruthless. His sharp eyes narrowed. It seems like Xu Yan doesn't wish to use such a method to force others against their will. I can understand her hesitation. She's such a good woman who always thinks for you. Even at this stage, she would still give up on this opportunity. It can be seen how deep her feelings for you are. Jingshan, you better watch carefully. I saw it very clearly. Mo Jingshan's tone carried a hint of mockery. I won't divorce her, and I won't marry Xu Yan. I'll only marry one Jinwan in my life. That's enough. And Xu Yan stood in the distance and did not approach. Although Mo Jingshan's voice was cold and light, and the pitch was not high, it was enough for her to hear it clearly from this distance. She lowered her eyes and did not speak again. A trace of bitterness flashed past the corner of her eyes. Last night, during the lightning and thunder, when Jinwan drove out of the Mo family home alone, she should have known, from Jinwan's unwavering trust in Mo Jingshan's gaze, she should have known Mo Xiao's expression was heavy, cold, and sullen. He then turned to look at Xu Yan's dispirited and quiet appearance and narrowed his eyes sharply and coldly. Xu Yan politely nodded at him and turned to leave. She did not wish to stand here and listen any further. Mo Xiaoza abruptly turned to look at Jinwan, his eyes cold. Jingshan, so what if you care about this Jinwan? Women are just accessories to your career. If not for the Mo family's power, how could Jinwan, who was said to have her eyes on the top of her head, be willing to get married at the age of 20? Before the two of you got married, I'm afraid she didn't even know what kind of person you were. As for now, I'm afraid she still doesn't know. T. Elder Mo suddenly scolded from the side. Women are accessories to your career? If you have the ability, say the same thing to Jingshan's mother when you return to America. Mo Xiaoza furrowed his brows, coldly glancing at the elder. It was clear that he was unhappy that he was everywhere. What are you glaring at? Decades ago, if it weren't for your old man's sharp eyes that allowed you to carry the beauty home, would you have been able to marry Jingshan's mother? Back then, she was also a young lady with her eyes on the top of her head. From the start, she did not even have any interest in a bad-tempered brat like you. In the end, didn't the two of you live happily ever after? You even gave birth to such a good grandson like Jingshan. Mo Xiao's chest was trembling with anger. Right now, he could not be bothered to argue with the elder. He only coldly glanced at Jinwan. Why aren't you answering? Do you understand Jingshan's past? Do you know what kind of person he is? Mo Jingshan's expression was very indifferent as he pulled Jinwan behind him. Jinwan suddenly chuckled lightly and walked out from behind him. She raised her eyes to look at Mo Xiaoza. Does Jingshan's mother know how old you were when you were weaned? Does she know how old you were when you stopped wetting the bed? Does she know how many teeth you lost when you were 7? Does she know how you held hands and kissed a certain young lady the first time you fell in love with her? Does she know what kind of person you were before you got married? Mo Xiao's expression was dark and cold. He immediately glared at her angrily. She definitely doesn't know. Jinwan maintained a smile on her face, but her lips were cold. Her eyes were clear and bright. She did not avoid his gaze in the slightest as she met his cold and ruthless gaze. Since she doesn't even understand your past, I think you can get a divorce at your age. Right now, it's very popular for old to marry the outstanding Xu Yan. Isn't that what you want? You're impudent. Mo Xiaoza abruptly scolded harshly. You're still young, but your temper is so fierce. Is this how your Ji family teaches you to be disrespectful to your elders? As your daughter-in-law, I can't even call you Dad. This is already a great disrespect to you. Are you lacking a few more words of disrespect? Jinwan retorted. That's right. Elder Mo almost wanted to stand by Jinwan's side and give her a round of applause. Mo Xiaoze angrily closed his eyes. He pointed at Jinwan and then looked at the smiling elder. This is the granddaughter-in-law you chose? Elder Mo nodded repeatedly, his face full of smiles. That's right, the granddaughter-in-law I chose. Mo Xiaoze, dash. Chapter 134. Very good. Mo Xiaoze was enraged. I want to see just what abilities this Jinwan has to make everyone in the Mo family favor her so much. She doesn't need any abilities. As long as she's Jinwan, that's enough, Mo Jingshan calmly replied. Elder Mo chimed in. Just as well, this old man also wants to see what abilities An Shuyan has, to be able to force you to use such methods against your own son. Elder Mo glared at Mo Xiaoze, whose expression had darkened. Everyone has their own preferences. You like An Shuyan's radish, yet you insist on forcing her into Jingshan's vegetable pit. Everyone is an individual with their own preferences. As long as Jingshan likes it, as long as the two of them live peacefully, you shouldn't let anyone interfere between them. To think that you're Jingshan's father. Mo Xiaoze coldly smiled. For someone like Jinwan who doesn't respect her elders, don't expect me to accept her in this lifetime. If you can treat her like a daughter-in-law, Jinwan will naturally show respect to her elders. Mo Jingshan's voice did not have any warmth. This is the most basic form of balance and respect between people. Elder Mo nodded. That's right. Humans are mutual. To nitpick unilaterally, this isn't the attitude of an elder. It's unreasonable. Mo Xiaoze's expression darkened. He fiercely glared at the two bodyguards standing by the door who did not dare to move. He wanted to scold them for being useless. They did not even know when Jinwan entered the room last night. However, he was so angry that he did not want to speak anymore. With a dark expression, he turned and left. Mo Xiaoze directly flung his sleeves and left. No one stopped him. The floor returned to silence. Elder Mo looked toward Mo Jingshan, his tone kind. Jingshan, were you all right last night? I was fine. I've made you worry. Mo Jingshan smiled mildly. The elder nodded. Your father's temper has always been like this since he was young. Since last night's matter did not succeed, I'm afraid that old face of his won't be able to hold on for more than a few days. As long as there are no misunderstandings between you and this G-brat, it'll be fine. Grandpa, don't worry. I'm sober. Jinwan winked at the old man. Yo, now you're happy. Yesterday, you locked yourself in Jingshan's room, hugging a pillow and curling up on the bed, and now you're gone? The elder laughed at her. Jinwan's face heated up. Grandfather, you're actually teasing me. Elder Mo laughed heartily. I won't laugh. Pa. The elder smiled and looked at Mo Jingshan with a red face. Jingshan, you'd better keep a close eye on this wife of yours. You're not allowed to lose her. If you dare to let her down, this old man will break your legs. Jinwan saw the old man raise his cane and instinctively moved closer to Mo Jingshan. Mo Jingshan chuckled, pulling the little woman who had subconsciously blocked his way behind him. His clear voice was like a flowing stream. I know. Elder Mo finally harumphed in satisfaction. His gaze shifted to Jinwan. How on earth did you sneak in last night? Jinwan winked at the elder and smiled. It's a secret. Little thing, you're still keeping your grandfather in suspense. All right, you probably didn't sleep well last night. Hurry back and rest. As for Jingshan's father, I have to think of a way to calm him down. As Elder Mo spoke, he walked out step by step with the support of his cane. As he walked, he muttered, Xiao Zhe has been in America for so many years. Standing on top of power, he's used to ordering his subordinates around. Everything has to be done according to his arrangements. His desire to control is too strong. I think he's tired of sitting in this position. Jinwan returned to the room on the 30th floor and took out the bag she had left here last night. She then called someone to secretly send the innocent female secretary back. She put down her phone and raised her eyes to see Mo Jingshan standing by the window of her room. The floor-to-ceiling windows were not open. He stood there, his gaze peering out at the balcony. Jinwan walked over and gently reached out to hug his waist from behind. She pressed her face against his back and breathed in the scent of his body that was like morning dew. She felt that his body temperature had returned to normal and rubbed her face against his back with a smile. I don't want to come to this hotel ever again. You didn't sleep well last night. Let's change places. You need to rest, she said against his back. The hands that had reached out to his chest were held by him. Mo Jingshen's gaze was still fixed on the balcony outside. From the 30th floor, he overlooked the boundless sea. Outside the window, the autumn wind blew past, causing the trees below to sway. He did not speak, only pressing her hands against his body and holding them gently. It was very gentle and warm. The room was quiet for a long time. Jin Wan decided to act spoiled as she circled around to his front. She pressed against his chest and raised her head. I know it was my fault for taking such a risk last night. I promise next time, I'll definitely. There won't be a next time, Mo Jingshen finally spoke. However, he lowered his eyes, and the seriousness in his gaze entered her eyes. All right, there won't be a next time. Jin Wan raised her hand and made an expression as though she was swearing to the heavens. I'll never climb such a high building again. I promise. Mo Jingshen continued to look at her coldly. Jin Wan tugged on his collar to lower his head. She kissed his chin twice and continued acting spoiled as she said, I promise. Don't be angry. If I had waited at home last night, I'm afraid I would have stayed up until my hair turned white. It's also good like this. Mo Jingshen's hand pinched her face. He touched the faint red mark on her face from last night. His warm fingers gently caressed it. His brows were deep and calm as he stared at her, as though he was looking into the depths of her soul. Jin Wan's mind was shaken by his gaze. However, she remembered that this hotel was not suitable for them to stay for long and was about to move away from his embrace. However, the man's arms suddenly tightened around her. He stared into her eyes and kissed her. You don't dirty? Jin Wan rushed to move her face away. I haven't showered properly since yesterday. When I woke up, I didn't wash my face or brush my teeth. I'm definitely dirty. Don't kiss me. However, before she could finish her words, her face was abruptly turned back by him. The man's hand supported her face, preventing her from moving away. When he kissed her again, he pushed her teeth apart and kissed her deeply. There was no room for her to dodge at all. She opened her eyes to look at him. In the next instant, the man pressed her against the wall by the window. Because Jin Wan did not brush her teeth in the morning, she did not even dare to open her mouth. Her entire body was stiff and unwilling to cooperate. However, his hands were like vines that wrapped tighter and tighter around her. It was as though he wanted to press her into his body and become one with her. Chapter 135. When they finally left the hotel and sat in the car, Jin Wan felt both her body and mind relaxed. You didn't rest well last night and were drenched in the rain. Go back and have a good sleep. Mo Jingshen's hand caressed Jin Wan's head. Are we heading back to the Yew Garden? Hearing the words Yew Garden, Jin Wan's expression clearly changed. Without needing her to say anything, Mo Jingshen could see the flash of hesitation in her eyes. Don't worry. In order to restrict my freedom, he used the method of kidnapping you to threaten me. The helpers in the Yew Garden were all sent away by him. No one was harmed. The man's voice was mild and quiet, but it caused Jin Wan's heavy heart to finally fall to the ground. Thankfully, nothing happened to Auntie Chen and the rest. The security in the Yew Garden is so perfect. If Auntie Chen hadn't opened the door, those people wouldn't have had the chance to sneak in, right? Jin Wan asked. Mo Jingshen glanced at her, holding her small hand. Forget it. Come back to the company with me. Otherwise, you won't be able to sleep well after you return. That won't happen. I'm just wondering how those people managed to sneak into the Yew Garden. Jin Wan was deep in thought. Could it be that back then, Director Mo personally went to the Yew Garden? If he hadn't gone personally, Auntie Chen wouldn't have opened the door. Mo Jingshen's tone was calm. This matter can't be blamed on her. I won't do anything to her. Relax. Her thoughts were seen through again. This man was really scary. Jin Wan grinned. It's not her fault in the first place. It's fine as long as you don't shift the blame to Auntie Chen. If you want to protect Auntie Chin, just say it. Mo Jingshin glanced at her, his low voice escaping from his throat. Today, come back to the company with me. When I have a meeting, the break room in the office is yours. Jin Wan was quite excited to be able to sleep in his break room openly. However, she pretended to be innocent as she asked, "Will I disturb you there?" Speaking of which, Mo Jingshin understood her better than she had imagined. He knew that she did not want to return to the U Garden right now. If she returned to Ao Lan International alone, she would not be able to sleep well. Mo Jingshin's handsome brows rose slightly. How can I disturb you when I'm sleeping? Are you going to take off your clothes and run into my arms when you're sleepwalking? Jin Wan pursed her lips. This was probably what Great Boss Missouri wanted to see her sleepwalking, right? If you don't mind the eyes of the other people in the conference room, I certainly don't mind giving it a try. Jin Wan had always been good at talking. She would never lose out in a verbal argument. The man's hand around her waist tightened, and his voice was close to her ear. After last night, Mrs. Mo's knowledge in this area has really made me look at you in a new light. There's no hurry to get into my arms in the conference room. As for the other requests you mentioned last night, I can satisfy them tonight. Mo Jingshin's seductive and gentle voice pressed against her ears. His finger seemed to touch her lips. The needs she mentioned last night, it went without saying. Jin Wan's thick skin instantly reached the boiling point. She raised her hand and slapped his hand away. I don't need it. Previously, I only wanted to help you out of desperation. Now it's too late. Jin Wan opened her mouth and bit down hard when his fingertip entered her lips. The man chuckled softly. Thinking of being shy now, isn't it too late? Jin Wan angrily bit down on his finger again. She then felt that this action was too lustful and immediately pushed his hand away. She turned to look out the window and composed herself. However, she realized that Mo Jingshin's laughter was really pleasant to listen to. His voice was by her ear. It was as though warmth was slowly enveloping her from behind. It was slightly husky, magnetic, and mild. It was as though gravity was pulling her closer with every passing second. Mo Corporation. Mo Jingshin did not rest for a moment. By the time he arrived at the company, it was already past 10 in the morning. He immediately headed for a meeting. Jin Wan's heart ached for his torment last night. However, she knew that he had always been a strict and serious person when it came to work. She did not disturb him. Knowing that he knew his limits, she returned to his office. Today, in the conference room, all the executives found that CEO Mo's mental state was slightly more tired than usual. Although it was not obvious, they could still see it. However, even so, CEO Mo appeared to be in a good mood. There was less of his usual coldness and sternness. Even when he was listening to the reports from the various departments, there was a hint of gentleness on his lips. All the executives were shocked. After all, in this report, there were problems with 2 departments. CEO Mo's attitude right now, they did not know if it was the calm before the storm or if something had happened. It was rare for CEO Mo to be so amiable in the company. When the meeting ended, the executives filed out of the conference room. Someone whispered, "CMO seems to be in a good mood today? It's rare for a meeting to end so quickly. He's letting us go after just an hour? It should be because there's someone waiting for him in Seo Mo's office. Who? Which deity could make Seo Mo so easy to talk to?" For the first time ever, he ended the weekly meeting half an hour early. It seems to be Seo Mo's wife. Shenmu was just about to head to the conference room to tidy up the documents. Seeing that Seo Mo had already come out, he rushed over. Seo Mo, secretary, and has just sent an electronic resignation letter over. Should the resignation be submitted to the HR department, or should I directly approve it? Shenmu asked softly. Mo Jingshin replied coldly, "Just approve it." "All right, I understand. Has Jin Wan eaten yet?" Mo Jingshin glanced at the time, asking in a heavy voice. Shenmu nodded. "Earlier at 11 o'clock p.m., I originally wanted to send someone to a nearby hotel to bring her a nutritious lunch. However, she said that she would be fine eating the company's staff meal. I followed her request and brought her lunch from the staff cafeteria. Right now, she should be almost done eating. Staff meal? Mo Jingshan's brows moved. He did not say more and directly entered the elevator. When they reached the office, Mo Jingshan pushed open the door. Inside the office, Jin Wan sat quietly on the sofa. In her hands was a disposable lunchbox. Inside was simple white rice and several vegetables and meat dishes. Although the Mo Corporation staff meal was also nutritious, it was still too simple. It was even more common than ordinary home-cooked dishes. Looking at the lunchbox in her hands and then at Jin Wan's satisfied expression, Mo Jingshan's usually calm eyes revealed a trace of gentleness. How do you feel eating the staff meal? Jin Wan was originally enjoying her meal and did not notice the movements in front of the door. The moment she heard the voice, she subconsciously stood up. The lunchbox in her hands almost fell to the ground. Chapter 136. Hearing Jin Wan's evaluation, Mo Jingshan approached and stood before her. His gaze landed on the lunchbox by her side. Jin Wan pointed with her chopsticks. Earlier, I asked Shin Mu to bring another portion up. I planned to eat it after you returned from your meeting. I didn't expect your meeting to be so short today. It's perfect to eat it while it's hot. But be careful, it's still a little hot. Mo Jingshan watched Jin Wan, who sat on the sofa and ate the simple employee meal with a satisfied expression. Is it really that good? He asked with a low chuckle. Jin Wan nodded seriously. No wonder so many people want to work for Mo Corporation. Even the quality of the employee meal is so good. It's clear that the other companies can't even hope to compare to our treatment in other aspects. She raised her eyes to look at him as she ate. The man was dressed in a black suit. The traces of dispiritedness from last night had faded away. He stood in the bright office and was especially eye-catching and good-looking. Mo Jingshan picked up the lunchbox and sat by her side. He glanced at her eating manner and smiled faintly. He did not say anything and sat there to accompany her to eat. The office door was tightly shut. Otherwise, anyone who saw this scene would be shocked to the point their jaws dropped. Mo Corporation's CEO boss did not discuss the hundreds of millions of US dollars in the afternoon. Instead, he sat lazily and calmly on the sofa in the office, accompanying Mrs. Mo to eat the employee meal. From time to time, he would bring her favorite stir-fried meat. As he did so, he said, "If you like it, ask Shin Mu to bring you another portion." "There's no need. This is enough. If I continue eating like this, I'll really get fat. Even if I get fat, I want you. What are you afraid of?" No, I'm already full. My stomach is about to burst. You don't want the shredded potatoes?" Then I'll eat a few more bites." "Do you want the fried tofu?" After the meal, someone from the secretary's office called to say that a representative from a partner company wanted to meet CEO Mo. To avoid disturbing his work, Jin Wan pushed open the door to the break room and entered. She had just taken a step in when she heard Mo Jingshan say from outside, "You were drenched in the rain last night. Take a hot shower and have a good sleep. I'll call you after I'm done." Jin Wan raised her hand and made an okay gesture before entering the break room. She had been to the break room in his office before. It was when she came over to coax him back to the U Garden. After such a long time, Jin Wan finally had the time to check on his break room. It was in the same minimalistic style as AO Lawn International, with cool colors. Back then, Grandfather Mo had been involved in the renovation of the U Garden. However, AO Lawn International and this break room clearly belonged to Mo Jingshan's style. Simple, low-key and plain. But because it was the place where Mo Jingshan used to live, the cold color made Jin Wan feel inexplicably intimate and warm. Because she had been drenched last night, she only took a shower in the hotel bathroom and didn't take a good shower. Now her body and head were a little itchy, and she couldn't just lie on the bed to sleep. She opened the wardrobe to take one of Mo Jingshan's shirts as a change of clothes and then take a shower. However, the moment the wardrobe door was opened, she was shocked to see that half of the space in Mo Jingshan's wardrobe was actually filled with women's clothes. They were all new. Thin, thick, long, short, inside, outside, women's clothes. Jin Wan took one out in shock and found that it was in her size. She then flipped through the others and found that they were all in her size. She found a thin shirt suitable for sleeping and held it in her arms. She knew that Mo Jingshan was busy in the office and couldn't go out to ask him, so she picked up her phone and sent him a message. "When did you prepare so many clothes for me in the wardrobe? I just opened the wardrobe. You gave me a fright." After sending the message, she waited for about a minute. Seeing that he didn't reply, she guessed that he was busy and went straight into the bathroom. After showering and drying her hair, she came out wearing the clothes Mo Jingshan had prepared for her. She carried the fragrant scent of shower gel and threw herself onto the large bed in the break room. She picked up her phone and saw the reply Mo Jingshan had sent her several minutes ago. "The day after that time you wore my shirt." Jin Wan stared at the phone screen in surprise. She was sure he was talking about the day after. The day after? He moved so quickly? At that time, he clearly didn't plan on moving back to the master bedroom. Even though their relationship had improved, they weren't too intimate. Yet, at that time, he had already made preparations that she would one day stay in his break room? Exactly how black-bellied was this man? Jin Wan really wanted to reply, but considering that he was currently working and that he clearly had work to do in the afternoon, she held it in and placed her phone down. She flipped over and lay on the bed, her eyes occasionally glancing at the wardrobe. Her hands were crossed in front of her chest, casually moving her fingers. However, her mind seemed to have flown into the clouds, giving her a surreal feeling. She picked up the phone by the pillow and looked at the 15 words and 2 punctuation marks he had just sent. After staring at it for a long time, she suddenly smiled and placed the phone down. She buried her face in the pillow and laughed. What should she do? Great Boss Mo's ability to tease her was becoming harder and harder to control. A few clothes and a message were enough to make her unable to calm down. Jin Wan flipped over again, thinking that she wouldn't be able to sleep anymore. However, last night had been so thrilling, and her mental state was unable to take it. She closed her eyes and began to count sheep, forcing herself to sleep. 1 sheep, 2 sheep, 3 sheep, 4 sheep. 98 Mo Jingshan's, 99 Mo Jingshan's, 100 Mo Jingshan's, 101 Mo Jingshan's. Jin Wan abruptly grabbed the pillow and pressed it against her head. Damn it, she couldn't sleep. The man outside was still focused on his work. Right now, her maiden heart was already stirred to the point where she couldn't sleep. Aha! In a certain staff office in the Mo Corporation, discussions were rife. I heard that Assistant Shun sent 2 sets of employee meals to the CEO's office today. Guess who those 2 sets of employee meals were for? It can't be Mrs. Mo, right? I heard that Mrs. Mo used to be the young miss of the famous Ji family in Haicheng. Since she was young, she ate all kinds of delicacies and high-end food. No matter how ordinary it was, it would definitely be prepared by a highly skilled helper or chef. She definitely wouldn't eat employee meals. That might not be the case. Our company's employee meals are clean and delicious. Even COMO would occasionally eat them when he's especially busy. Mrs. Mo is also a person. It's not strange for her to eat employee meals with COMO in the office. Impossible, she definitely wouldn't eat it. Do you want to make a bet? All of a sudden, Shenmu stood in front of the office door. He coughed and cleared his throat, speaking sternly. Why are you all standing together and discussing? Are you all done with your work? Aren't you all too free? In an instant, the employees scattered like birds, quickly leaving. Chapter 137. In the evening, it was almost time to knock off. Mo Corporation CEO's office. The business partners received a satisfactory contract and chatted politely for over 10 minutes before finally leaving. The office returned to silence. Mo Jingshan's gaze landed in the direction of the break room. After the secretary and assistant came in to report on the day's work, he glanced at the time and closed the documents in his hands. He stood up and walked to the door of the break room. It was very quiet inside. It could be seen that Jin Wan had indeed fallen asleep. The door to the break room was quietly pushed open. On the soft, large bed, Jin Wan slept soundly. Her soft, long hair covered the pillow, and her sleeping face was peaceful and peaceful. Her phone was placed by the pillow, within reach. It was as though he could see that she was still debating whether to pick up her phone to reply to his message before she fell asleep. Mo Jingshan smiled and picked up her phone, placing it on the bedside table. Jinwan slept too soundly. Mo Jingshan sat down by the bed and watched her sleep. He did not move and only watched her like this. In the stormy night, the little woman seemed to have descended from the sky, climbing up from the balcony and rushing into his arms with a body full of injuries. The scene repeatedly replayed before his eyes. He stared at her for a long time. The red marks on Jinwan's face had already faded to the point where they could no longer be seen. Mo Jingshan held one of her hands and turned it over. He looked at the wound on her palm. Although it was very small and not considered serious, because it had not been disinfected, the edges of the wound were slightly red. He stood up and walked out of the break room, calling Shenmu to buy some medicine. Not long after, Mo Jingshan received the medicine and returned to the break room. It was so quiet that there was not a single sound. He could only vaguely hear Jinwan's light breathing as she slept. It had a gentle frequency, causing one to feel that this room was peaceful and quiet. The medicine that Mo Jingshan had Shenmu buy was not as painful as disinfectant alcohol. However, when Jinwan's palm was suddenly lightly sprinkled with the medicine, it still felt slightly itchy and painful due to the anti-inflammatory ingredients. Even though it was not obvious, she still furrowed her brows uneasily in her sleep. She instinctively wanted to retract her hand and let out a soft moan in discomfort. Mo Jingshan held her hand and didn't let her draw it back. As Jinwan struggled harder, he bent down and gently kissed her on the lips. Finally, because the numbness on her lips overwhelmed the slight itch and pain in her palm, her furrowed brows gradually relaxed, and she went back to sleep. Her cherry-colored lips curved into a faint smile as though she had a sweet dream. When the little woman slept, there was a special kind of sweet temptation. If it weren't for the fact that both his hands were occupied and he had to continue applying medicine for her, Mo Jingshan would not mind pressing her under his body and kissing her harshly for a while longer. He slowly got up and gently held her hand. He slowly sprinkled white medicinal powder on the small wounds on her palm. The wounds weren't serious and didn't need to be wrapped with gauze, but the simple disinfection and anti-inflammatory process couldn't be neglected. Jinwan's clothes were thin and loose. Mo Jingshan could easily pull her sleeves open and apply medicine on the wound on her arm. He then lifted the hem of her clothes. The man who was about to continue applying medicine on her leg paused for a moment. After showering, she had directly put on these clothes. There was nothing under the clothes, and the scenery under the clothes was completely exposed. Mo Jingshan suppressed the fire burning in his eyes. After applying medicine on the wound on her leg, he placed the medicine on the bedside cabinet. Then he lowered his eyes. He watched the little woman who instinctively curled up her legs due to the slight coldness of the blanket being pulled aside and the hem of her clothes. Last night, the two of them did not rest well. Originally, he should have let her sleep a little longer. However, this scene was too shocking. Mo Jingshan's extraordinary self-control, which he was able to maintain last night under the effects of the medicine, almost completely collapsed at this moment. He bent down and picked up a strand of her hair. The fragrance of the shampoo and shower gel mixed with the faint fragrance of her body. Mo Jingshan curved his lips, planting a kiss on her hair. He then tilted his head, planting a kiss on her fair and beautiful brows. Slowly, he moved down to her small and straight nose, and then slowly covered the soft lips that he had not kissed enough earlier. The warm, soft and beautiful touch caused the man to feel a momentary sense of submission towards Gu Jingshan. His kiss gradually deepened. No matter how deep Jinwan's sleep was, she still opened her eyes. However, she was not fully awake. Her slightly dazed eyes saw the man above her. Seeing that it was Mo Jingshan who was kissing her, she did not resist. Taking advantage of the gap between their lips, she murmured with a smile, "Are you done with your work?" Mo Jingshan's movements did not stop. His palm had already touched the softness of her chest through her thin clothes. The kiss on her lips deepened, and his other hand held her waist. The man's kiss moved past her cheeks, lingered on her lips, and slowly moved down to her neck. Because Jinwan had actually fallen asleep under him, The man suddenly bit down on her collarbone, causing her to shiver. The moment she opened her eyes, she drowsily raised her hand to press her head. "What time is it?" She had just woken up and asked hoarsely. "It's already time to get off work." The man continued kissing her collarbone and neck, but this time, the kiss was more passionate and intense. His voice was as hoarse as hers. Jean-Wan was about to get up but was unable to. Only then did she realize what Mo Jingshan was doing to her body. Her sleepiness was completely gone. Before she could speak, the man's hand had already reached under her clothes. His scorching palm caressed her back and moved up, pressing her entire body firmly into his embrace. Under her slightly surprised gaze, he held the back of her neck and kissed her harshly twice on the lips. "You're awake." "And I'm awake." Jean-Wan was startled. She realized that they were still in the break room beside his office, which meant that they were still in his company. She mumbled against his lips, "What are you doing? What do you think I'm doing?" He chuckled softly. In an instant, he kissed her until she almost forgot what night it was. Finally, the man's actions became more and more excessive. Jean-Wan was provoked into moaning, softly asking, "You didn't sleep much last night. Today, you came straight to the company. Is your body able to take it?" What she meant was that she was worried that he did not sleep well last night. After staying up late and working so hard, she wanted him to take this opportunity to have a good sleep. Chapter 138. What I mean is, before Jean-Wan could finish her words, Mo Jingshan's kiss was already hot and intense. He pried open her lips and invaded her teeth. This is the company, the office?" Jean-Wan wanted to speak, but her words were choppy. Every word was swallowed by him. Even the places he kissed were more intense than before, causing her to tremble nonstop. Her neck, collarbone, shoulders, chest, and even further down Jean-Wan was very sensitive, so sensitive that her entire body trembled from his teasing. Those kisses were filled with an even more passionate and infatuated flavor, causing one to be unable to extricate themselves. He tasted every inch of her, not letting go of a single trace of her sweetness. "Even if you're off work, there should still be people in your company. Oh, let's go home first." "Not good." The man's resolute and decisive voice landed on her lips once more. Under Jean-Wan's nervous and embarrassed expression, he said, "Weren't you very powerful last night? Are you going to shrug it off today?" Jean-Wan narrowed her eyes at him. "Mo Jingshan, don't fail to appreciate my kindness. Yesterday I was..." He suddenly kissed the softest and most sensitive spot behind her ear. She immediately moaned, and then she heard Mo Jingshan nibbling on her ear. His voice was rough and low, which he had been holding back for a long time. "Last night, if it weren't for the surveillance cameras, I would have definitely done it until you couldn't say a single word. Jean-Wan, how could I let you go now?" She clearly felt that the man could no longer restrain himself. His lower body was hot and dangerously pressing against her. Jean-Wan whimpered from his kiss and didn't know where to place her hands for a moment. In the next instant, Mo Jingshan pulled up her hand from the bedsheets and pressed it against his body. "Come, I'll satisfy you." His voice was low, and there was a hint of naughtiness in it. She suddenly shivered and couldn't retract her hand no matter how hard she tried. The temperature of her hand was so hot that her whole body felt like it was burning. She blushed and turned her head away to avoid looking at him. This was the first time he had broken through the original boundaries. She could only blame herself for daring to say anything in a moment of desperation last night. Now, she finally suffered the consequence. In just a moment, her hands were sore and tired. However, because of the movements of her hands, Mo Jingshan planted numerous kisses on her shoulders and cheeks. "I can't take it anymore." She was now annoyed by the emptiness. Just as she was about to retract her hand, her wrist was clasped by the man's palm. She kept trying to break free, but she was tightly controlled by him and pressed back again. "Mo Jingshan." Jean-Wan's expression was angry, but her voice was hoarse and soft. "N." The man sucked her earlobe and said hoarsely, "Continue." Jean-Wan wanted to cry, but no tears came out. The heat on her face was almost comparable to the heat in her palms. It was similarly scorching hot. The phone that Mo Jingshan had casually tossed onto the bedside suddenly vibrated at this moment. Go answer the phone first. Jin Wan's voice was soft, and her eyes were moist and red. Although she did not want to cry, she was almost forced to. He really brought this upon himself. Why did she mention using her hands yesterday? Mo Jingshan glanced at her before glancing at the phone on the bedside table. He saw that the caller was Shu Yan. He reached out to hang up, lowering his head to place a kiss on Jin Wan's face. He chuckled softly, "Your hands are sore?" However, Jin Wan turned to look at the phone on the bedside table. "Who's calling? Why aren't you answering?" Before she could finish speaking, his phone began vibrating again. This time, she paid attention and raised her head slightly to see the caller ID on his phone. It was still a string of numbers without a note. She recognized the numbers. It was actually Shu Yan. She called me twice in a row. Something must have happened, right? Mo Jingshan was expressionless as he calmly said, "Her electronic resignation letter has already been submitted to the company. Shinmu will handle it. There's no need for me to handle it." Jin Wan took the opportunity to move her hand up slightly, avoiding the man's heated gaze. She took the initiative to pass his phone to him. "Then I'm even more curious. She's going to return to America soon and has already taken the initiative to resign. What else can she talk to you about?" "Curious?" Mo Jingshan's brows coldly furrowed. The phone gradually stopped vibrating. 10 seconds later, it rang again. Mo Jingshan saw Jin Wan's insistence and stood up. At the same time, he pulled her up and pressed her into his embrace. He held her waist with one hand to prevent her from escaping and used the other to pick up the phone. He pressed the speaker button. The moment the call connected, Mo Jingshan's tone was extremely calm. "What's the matter?" Shu Yan was silent for a moment. After a moment, she softly said, "So Mo, I've just received my resignation letter." The speed was very fast. "Did you approve it?" The man was indifferent. It was Shinmu. The other side of the phone was silent for a long moment before Shu Yan's slightly soft voice came through. "You don't even plan on handling my resignation letter. You're really heartless and cold to people unrelated to you." Jin Wan sat on his lap, watching the man's cold and indifferent face. Only now did she feel that the Mo Jingshan that others said was hard to approach was true. Mo Jingshan remained extremely cold. "When you came, you didn't ask for my permission. When you leave, there's even less of a need to wait for my approval." Shu Yan instantly tightened her grip on the phone. What he meant was that her coming and going had nothing to do with him. From the start to the end, there was no need for her to leave a single trace at his place. This was indeed Mo Jingshan's style. Shu Yan calmed herself down and said, "What Uncle Mo means is that after we settle all the details of the cooperation with the Mo Corporation in China, we'll return to America next weekend. I'll go back with him, but before that my father and I will stay with him at the Mo family for a few days." Mo Jingshan did not speak, only calmly listening. "Also, my father has already planned on canceling my engagement with the Wilson family. That's your problem. There's no need to tell me." Mo Jingshan's attitude was extremely indifferent. Shu Yan sighed slightly. She clearly knew that he was unwilling to listen. After thinking for a moment, she still said what she wanted to say. "Previously, I heard the Ji family's second miss mention some things. She mentioned Jin Wan's recent changes. From some of the details, don't you think that Jin Wan is hiding something from you?" Jin Wan listened by the side. She slightly raised her brows, meeting Mo Jingshan's indifferent gaze. She smiled at him, suddenly leaning close to his ear. Using Shu Yan's tone, she softly said, "Don't you think that Jin Wan is hiding something from you?" Mo Jingshan chuckled softly and pinched the waist of the naughty woman in his arms. He was still cold and indifferent to the person on the other end of the phone. "This is my private matter. No one has the right to interfere or ask." Mo Jingshan directly hung up, tossing his phone to the side. He abruptly threw Jin Wan, who was mischievously causing trouble by his ear, onto the bed. His long legs blocked her thighs, leaning over and pressing down. Chapter 139. Jin-won did not even have the chance to struggle or cry out. The man pressed her down on the bed and kissed her until she was out of breath. This was Emo Jingshin's resting room. His scent was everywhere. His open arms were enough to cover the sky. There was no way for her to escape. "What did you hide from me?" Emo Jingshin glanced at her, speaking in a low voice. At the same time, he tugged at the collar of his shirt. His movements were natural and casual, but in Jin-won's eyes, it was extremely seductive. "I've actually hidden a lot from you. For example, pretending to love you every day. Only then can I gain your complete trust. Then, one day, when the time is right, I'll poison you, and the MO Corporation in your hands and shine in the future will belong to me." Jin-won blinked at him as she spoke. She acted as though she was telling the truth. "Is that all you're capable of?" Emo Jingshin held her waist, pressing her against his lower body. Jin-won felt some pain from the pressure. She raised her head to look at him, but before she could complain, he pressed her down again. The man's voice was clear and heavy. "Based on how infatuated I am with you, you can easily control my thoughts and actions. There's no need to poison me at all. Right now, MO Corporation can be transferred to your name and owned by you. I'm all yours. Whatever you want, isn't it all just a matter of a single word?" "I'm joking." "I'm not joking." He looked at her. Jin-won felt uncomfortable from the heat of his lower body. She tried to twist her body to avoid his dangerous resistance. "Continue." He gave a simple order. He pulled her hand down, watching her face that was once again filled with heat. He glanced at her bashful appearance. "Continue?" She had already received a call, and she still wanted to continue. Jin-won's evil thoughts of revenge rose. The moment her hand reached down, she suddenly used force. After Emo Jingshin let out a muffled groan, she paused. In an instant, it was as though she was inspired. She was finally willing to act like a serious beginner, learning from the videos she had seen online. "Continue." Emo Jingshin's breathing became increasingly hurried. Just as Jin-won seemed to have grasped his sensitive spot and began to exert more force, he held the back of her head with one hand, forcing her to raise her head. He pressed against her harshly and bent down to kiss her heavily on the lips. Jin-won could even hear his slightly uncontrollable panting. His other hand suddenly slid down her back to the back of her waist, caressing and teasing every inch of her skin before pressing into his embrace. "I have indeed underestimated you." His voice was already tainted with a strong sense of lust. It was as difficult to restrain the strength and grace of his hand that was firmly pressed behind her head. Without giving Jin-won any time to catch her breath, Jin-won could only hear the crisp sound of the belt on his waist. She couldn't help but let out a low moan as her waist sunk in. Emo Jingshin's kiss left her neck. He raised his head and landed on her lips. His kiss was gentle and delicate. Jin-won was afraid that she would make a sound. After all, this place was right next to his office. She turned her head away and bit her lip harshly. He lifted a strand of hair that had fallen over her shoulder and tucked it behind her ear. "Remember my words, What are you talking about? I'm yours." The man's low and heavy voice exploded in her mind. Jin-won abruptly opened her eyes and saw that in the depths of his eyes, only her reflection was imprinted. She was going to die. Was he using a big move on her? Jin-won was already about to overflow. Because of his gaze, she suddenly moaned softly and raised her hand to cover her face. Emo Jingshin chuckled lightly. He pulled her hand away and brought it to his lips for a kiss. Knock knock. There was a sudden knock on the door of the break room. When Jin-won heard the knock on the door, she immediately shivered and hurriedly tried to stop, but Emo Jingshin held her firmly and didn't let her escape. Emo Jingshin didn't let her escape. "There's someone," she softly said in a hoarse voice. Shin Mu, who was standing outside the door, had actually braced himself to come. After all, it was already time to get off work. He also knew that Jin-won was here. Right now, both CEO Emo and Jin-won were in the break room. Him knocking on this door was clearly an act of sending himself to death. However, Director Emo had suddenly come to inspect the company. Regardless of whether he was the chairman of Shine Group or CEO Mo's father, there was no way to stop him. "Mo, are you asleep?" As Shin Mu spoke, he felt his scalp turning numb. He felt that his little life was about to end. When Jinwan heard that it was Shin Mu, she guessed that he had already guessed the situation inside. Her body was as tense as a drawn bow. She was so tense that she did not dare to move. Mo Jingshan also trembled because of her body's instinctive reaction due to her nervousness. He abruptly lowered his head and bit down on her fair shoulder, barely holding back the moan that almost escaped his lips. What followed next was like a reward and punishment. Not only did the man's actions not stop, they became even more violent and impudent. Yet it was extremely comfortable. Jinwan glared at him and could not help but moan softly. Outside, could it be that they had already heard it? While she was worried, she was also stimulated to the point that her entire body was trembling. She clearly knew that this was not the right time to continue, yet she was willing to sink into it and be consigned to eternal damnation. Jinwan woke up from a slight jolt. She opened her eyes and discovered that she was in a limousine, separated from the driver's seat in front. Her memory paused at the moment when her mind was about to scatter. It was as though she could still remember the impudent act that surpassed her rationality. She abruptly turned her head, only to meet Mo Jingshan's deep and boundless gaze. "Mo Jingshan, you really fainted at the right time." Jinwan completely did not expect that she would actually faint. At that time, she really could not gather her emotions. She could not remember how it ended, how she showered, or how she put on her clothes. She narrowed her eyes at him. "In the future, I'll never go to your company again." Shinmu most likely already knew about it. Mo Jingshan chuckled hoarsely, rubbing her puffed-up face. "We're husband and wife. What can he do even if he doesn't know?" The man was still dressed in a well-fitted suit. This simple suit and shirt style might not look good on other men, but on Mo Jingshan, it gave off a refreshing feeling. It was surprisingly fitting and perfectly matched his cold, indifferent, yet well-mannered character. "Back then, Shinmu suddenly came to the office to look for you. Did something happen?" Jinwan did not wish to discuss the incident in the break room and directly changed the topic. The people from Shine Group came to the company for a surprise inspection. They only arrived for half an hour before leaving. Mo Jingshan's hand slowly rubbed Jinwan's earlobe, a hint of a smile in his eyes. "At that time, I had already carried you into the bathroom and soaked you in a daze." Chapter 140. Jinwan turned to look out and found that they had arrived at the main gate of the U Garden. Mo Jingshan finally let go of her, helped her adjust the collar of her coat, opened the door, and motioned for her to get out of the car. Jinwan's hands and feet were sore from being tossed around by him. As soon as she opened the car door, she almost fell down. Fortunately, Mo Jingshan was behind her and reached out to support her. He quietly pressed her into his arms and glanced down at her. Receiving Jinwan's hateful glare, he immediately understood her situation, and the corners of his lips turned up in a triumphant smile. Previously, she said she would do it, but now she couldn't say a word. He really did it. Jinwan rolled her eyes at him, steadied herself, and walked inside. "Madam!" Auntie Chen came out to welcome her. The moment she saw Jinwan, she immediately stood in front of the door with an apologetic expression. Her eyes were worried and apologetic. Seeing Auntie Chen's expression, Jinwan smiled at her and intimately held Auntie Chen's arm to say, "No matter what happened before, it's not your fault. Don't think too much. Look, I'm fine, aren't I?" In fact, Auntie Chen didn't know what had happened, but when she came back today, she checked the surveillance footage of the U Garden and saw the scene of Jinwan being taken away. Only then did she realize what a big mistake she had made yesterday. She actually opened the door and let in the people who could threaten Jinwan, and then she was sent out, causing Jinwan to be in danger after returning home alone. She really shouldn't have done that. Later, she called the Mo family, apologized to Elder Mo, and asked about the situation. After confirming that Jinwan was fine, she was reassured to wait at home. "I've seen the surveillance footage." At that time, It was clearly Director Mo who said he wanted to enter the U Garden to see where you and Mr. Mo live now, but in the surveillance footage, who on earth took you away? Auntie Chen was still full of apology, holding Jinwan's hand with lingering fear, and kept asking. It's all right. No matter who they are, I'm standing in front of you safe and sound. Jinwan patted her hand and asked with concern, You called the Mo family, didn't you? Grandfather didn't blame you, did he? Auntie Chen shook her head and looked at Jinwan with heartache. Don't worry about us. Go in and sit for a while. You must not have had a good rest these days. You must be frightened, right? I'll make you some tranquilizer soup to calm your nerves. Jinwan pursed her lips into a smile and nodded. She turned to see that Mo Jingshan had already entered the door and rushed to follow him in. However, she saw that the man was standing in front of the television, his eyes dark as he watched the surveillance video that the helper had brought out. On the screen, he saw everything that happened after Jinwan returned home alone. Jinwan could feel the cold and stern emotions in his dark gaze. She stared at the image on the television for a long time. She walked over and placed her hand in his, saying, At the time, those two people didn't want to hurt me. Later on, I was only sent to one of Director Mo's private villas in High City. Aside from locking me up, they didn't do anything to me. After that, grandfather rushed over and took me away. After saying this, she asked the servant for the remote control and decisively turned off the TV. It's true. That day, aside from being a little scared and worried about you, I wasn't hurt at all. Jinwan's warm and soft voice was close by his side. Her hand was still pressed against his palm. Delete this surveillance video. Don't look at it anymore. If I made you feel the slightest bit scared, it was because I didn't do well enough. Mo Jingshan held her hand, his voice low and heavy. Jinwan dragged him back to the room. After entering the room, she hugged him and rubbed her face against his chest. She said softly, You didn't do well enough. In this world, there's no man who treats me better than you. You haven't rested. Don't think about it. Sleep early tonight, okay? The man lowered his head to look at her. His long and powerful fingers ran through her long hair, and his other hand wrapped around her waist, locking her in his embrace. Recalling the scene he had seen in the surveillance camera, he said in a low voice, I'll sleep later. I'll accompany you for a while first. I don't need to accompany you. He held her and sat on the edge of the bed. He pressed her head against his shoulder and snuggled up to her. Jinwan buried her head in his embrace. Previously, she thought that she would not be able to sleep well for several days after returning to the U Garden. However, after a moment, the shadow in her heart completely dissipated. In fact, as long as the Mo family did not come, even an unidentified fly would not be able to enter. There was no place safer than the U Garden. Mo Jingshan did not speak. She knew that his current mood was affected by the surveillance video earlier and did not break the silence. She reached out to hold his hand and gestured with her own hand in his palm. Time passed bit by bit. Seeing that Mo Jingshan still had no intention of sleeping, Jinwan began to find a topic to talk about while playing with his fingers. Do you really know a great deal about me before? She asked. Mo Jingshan glanced at her. Are you very curious about this? No. I don't have any dark cards up my sleeves that I'm afraid others will use against me. It's just that there are some things in the Ji family that I can't bring up to the surface. However, those are all things that I used to target my father and Auntie Shen. Jinwan leaned into his embrace. Then do you know that when I was a teenager, I studied in America for a few years. Although I wasn't particularly serious in my studies, I still managed to get all A's. If not for my good grades, I would have had to continue studying in America for a few more years. Perhaps I would have missed the opportunity to marry you. Mo Jingshan's gaze suddenly became very deep. He looked at her. When you were studying in America, I was also in America. The fate that should come will come sooner or later. I won't miss it. Based on what you're saying, do you think we've met before? Jinwan raised her head to look at him. Mo Jingshan's brows moved slightly. He smiled meaningfully and suddenly lowered his head to kiss her. Why did you suddenly kiss me? Jinwan was afraid that the reason he did not sleep was because he wanted to continue squeezing her. She subconsciously wanted to jump out of his embrace. If they were to do it again today, she would definitely lose her life. Previously, she was already half dead. She felt that right now, her little life was in his hands. Mo Jingshan did not answer her earlier question. He only softly said, "Previously, I said that the person I'm bringing you to meet will come over tomorrow. You don't have to wake up too early. If you want to go out, wait for the person to come before going out." After speaking, he finally let go of her and got up to take a shower. Jin-Wan laid on the bed and looked at the messages on her phone. When he came out, she was just about to bring her laptop to the study when the man who came out of the bathroom pulled her onto the bed. Chapter 141. Hurry and go to sleep. I'll go to the study. Jin-Wan reached out to retrieve the laptop that had fallen on the carpet by the bed. Mo Jingshan placed her on the bed and pressed his body against hers. He planted a kiss on her swollen lips that had been ravaged in the afternoon. Tired? He kissed her. Jin-Wan nodded seriously. She was really tired. She almost hugged his thigh and begged him to spare her life. This man's stamina was not something she could handle. He lowered his head and kissed her ear. Then, he lay down beside her and stretched out his long arms to hold her in his arms. His low and husky voice was accompanied by his warm breath in her ear. "Sleep with me, En?" Ji-Nuan obediently put down the computer and did not insist on going to the study. She turned around and buried herself in his arms, holding him with both hands. She gently said in his arms, "All right." The next day, when Ji-Nuan woke up, it was already past 9 in the morning. After washing up, she changed her clothes and went downstairs. Seeing Auntie Chin busily serving breakfast to the dining table, she felt that she hadn't felt this warm and peaceful in a long time. After breakfast, Ji-Nuan went straight to the studio. As soon as she stepped out of the villa, she looked up and was stunned to see a tall, thin, short-haired woman about 1.7 meters tall standing in the yew garden by her car. Ji-Nuan subconsciously took a step back and turned to ask Auntie Chin, "Who is this? Can any stranger enter the yew garden now?" Auntie Chin walked out, took a look and answered with a smile, "Madam, Mr. Mo let her in. Mr. Mo said to let her follow you from now on." Follow me? Ji-Nuan paused for a moment before returning to herself. She turned to look at the tall, thin, short-haired young woman. "Mrs. Mo, my name is Fong Ling. I've trained at the 11 Training Center in the United States for 8 years. From today onwards, I'll be your personal bodyguard." Seeing Ji-Nuan's shocked and confused look, the man reached out to open the car door, motioned for Ji-Nuan to get in, and gestured for her to get in. They seemed to be well trained. Ji-Nuan secretly wondered, could it be that the person Mo Jingshan wanted her to meet was this person in front of her? A female bodyguard? "Did Mo Jingshan really ask you to come?" Ji-Nuan asked. She had only seen male bodyguards. This was her first time seeing a female bodyguard. Fong Ling answered respectfully and seriously, "Yes, Mrs. Mo, Ji-Nuan." Ji-Nuan looked at her for a long time, but since she was sent by Mo Jingshan, she had no reason to be suspicious. She opened the door of the driver's side and was about to get in when Fong Ling suddenly said, "Mrs. Mo, you should sit here. I'll drive you." "Are you driving?" "Yes, when you go out in the future, whether you're driving or taking other cars, I have to be by your side. I'll also drive the car to ensure your safety." All right. This bodyguard was too serious and rigid. Ji-Nuan guessed that she was completely obedient and did not make things difficult for her. She walked around the car and sat on the passenger seat where the door was already open. After getting on the car, she told him where she was going and then picked up her cell phone to call Mo Jingshan. When the call connected, Mo Jingshan directly pointed out the purpose of her call. "What is it? About the bodyguards? The person you said you wanted me to meet is the bodyguard you arranged for me? Is this Fong Ling?" Ji-Nuan turned to look at Fong Ling, who was driving. The other party was completely unaffected by her call and continued to drive without a word. Nan Heng is the direct superior of 11 Training Center in America. Fong Ling is the most skilled and has the highest level of training there. "Initially, I planned to have Nan Heng introduce you to her," Mo Jingshan calmly explained to her. Nan Heng has an urgent matter to attend to in America this morning. He doesn't plan to waste any more time, so he sent Feng Ling to the U Garden to meet you. Jin Wan did not have much of an impression of Nan Heng, but she knew that the two closest brothers to Mo Jingshan were Qin Siding and Nan Heng, who was once famous in Haicheng and later became famous in America. She was not very clear about this person's background. She only knew that he was close to Mo Jingshan and seemed to be in the arms business. He was the type who licked blood from the tip of a gun. From today onwards, Feng Ling will be your personal bodyguard. Her skills are not bad, and she is quiet and reticent. She won't disturb you and will only stay by your side when necessary. At other times, she won't make you feel uncomfortable. Jin Wan made several sounds of assent and hung up the phone. She then turned to look at the responsible bodyguard. After thinking for a moment, she sent a message to Mo Jingshan. You picked so many people, but in the end, you chose a female bodyguard for me. Her personality is so old-fashioned and serious. I don't even know how to talk to her. Mo Jingshan replied, You want me to send a male bodyguard to chat with you? Jin Wan, I can consider this. Mo Jingshan, don't even think about it. Jin Wan. After arriving at the Jin Lin building where Mo Nwan's studio was located, Feng Ling parked the car and very consciously disappeared from her sight. As expected, she was well-trained. Nwan entered the studio. Ever since the studio was invested by Mo Corporation, many things had to be put on the agenda. Jin Wan did not forget that she was still carrying a debt of $200 million. Boss Xiaoba had given Jin Wan a call early in the morning. Seeing that Jin Wan had arrived, she rushed over to hand the new financial report to her. Previously, Supervisor Su really did something to the report. Yesterday, I went to the finance department to review it again and redid it based on the company's income and expenditure. It's exactly the same as your budget. There's no difference at all. Jin Wan received it and glanced at it. She then raised her brows and glanced at Xiaoba. You worked overtime in the studio yesterday and redid it yourself? Xiaoba nodded. Her expression was somewhat bashful yet wanting to be praised. Right now, many of the people left in the studio aren't very professional. Right now, the finance department is also like a pile of loose sand. I'm not sure if I can do it, so I gave it a try last night. She did not expect this adorable intern assistant to have such a meticulous and serious heart. Jin Wan smiled. Let's start recruiting in the next 2 days. Have the remaining people from the HR department come to my office later. All right, boss. Xiaoba's face was filled with excitement as she turned to leave. Jin Wan suddenly reached out to tug on her collar. Why are you so excited? Xiaoba turned back and pushed her glasses. She grinned and said, Because our studio now has an investment of $200 million. All of the construction projects can continue as normal. Furthermore, we have such a huge backing like Mo Corporation. Just thinking about it makes me feel that we will rise to become the largest real estate company in Haicheng. At that time, I will be the most senior employee in the company. How can I not be excited? Jin Wan. Chapter 142. Jin Wan sat in her office, staring at the computer screen on her desk. The studio was still in the stage of preparation. From an outsider's perspective, there were only expenses and no income. No one knew what Jin Wan was planning. Some even thought that Mo Jingshan was so rich that he would casually throw her $200 million for her to squander. Even though Jin Wan had received such a large investment, her studio was still not viewed favorably by most people. The domestic real estate market continued to decline. Many companies were eager to sell the land they had previously obtained at high prices. Jin Wan now had sufficient funds on hand. Not only could the several projects under the studio's name continue to be carried out, but she had also expanded her target to several large cities and suburbs around Hai City. Every place that was valuable to her was marked with a red circle on the electronic map. Which cities would continue to expand in the future, which abandoned residential areas or barren lands that were currently not valued, were also marked with a blue circle. She was purchasing. From an outsider's perspective, she was purchasing crazily. They thought that she did not understand the market and that she would definitely lose everything. All of a sudden, there was a knock on the office door. Xiaoba rushed in with an extremely anxious expression. Jinwan only glanced at her before returning her gaze to the computer screen. She unhurriedly scanned through the map of High City and its surroundings, marking out the places that would definitely be included in the city's plans. Boss Nguyen, that Seo Jin's husband from last time, is here. Xiaoba had run in too much of a rush. She swallowed her saliva before rushing to say, and he brought a few people with him. It seems like he's here to settle scores with us. Jinwan's hand paused on the mouse. She turned around. Seo Jin's husband? Settle what scores? Her words had just landed when the office door was heavily pushed open with a peng sound. Xiaoba jumped in fright. Jinwan noticed the few people who had suddenly barged in. The ones walking in front were tall and strong. They appeared to be those unreasonable thugs and bodyguards who wielded machetes and went around demanding debts. With those people clearing the way, a man who was about 40 years old walked in. He was well-dressed, but he didn't have a good expression on his face. Although he didn't look ferocious, he obviously didn't look like a god of plague that could be easily sent away. After the man entered, he looked around the office coldly and arrogantly and finally fixed his eyes on Jinwan behind the desk. Are you Miss Ji? Jinwan sat behind the office desk. Her gaze was indifferent, and she was unhurried. I remember that the security guards of Jin Lin building are rather diligent. To be able to bring someone in like this, you're not simple. As if he didn't expect a young woman to have such a strong aura, the man coldly raised his eyebrows and smiled again. However, his smile made people feel a chill down their spines. I didn't expect Miss Ji to be so daring at such a young age. I've heard about MO Corporation investing in you. I know that Miss Ji has a backer, but no matter how strong your backer is, you shouldn't meddle in other people's business. The man seemed to be smiling, but his tone was cold and unkind. Jinwan's beautiful brows rose without a trace. I was wondering why you suddenly came here. So it's because your backyard is on fire and you've been suppressing a stomach full of vexation, so you came here to vent it out? As she spoke, Jinwan chuckled softly. Seo Jin came here to make a fuss a few days ago. The two of you are truly husband and wife. One brought a lawyer to terminate the contract, while the other brought thugs to block the door. Those who don't know would think that the two of you are opening some shuraba. You're not even in charge of a proper investment company. The man coldly narrowed his eyes. You also know that I'm here to block the door? I don't wish for your studio to be smashed into smithereens just after it was built. I'll have to trouble Miss Ji to make a trip with me right now and explain the video you obtained to my wife. Jinwan ignored him. She casually pulled up the information of this investment company on her computer. CEO Jin, who came to terminate the contract previously, was the person in charge of Tianxing Investment Company's finance department. The person before her was the general manager of Tianxing Investment Company. His surname was Xiao, and he was also the legal representative and founder of this company. Jinwan turned back to look at him. Her tone was gentle and calm. Mr. Xiao, I have no interest in your family matters. The private dealings between you and the previous finance department manager of our studio have nothing to do with me. Supervisor Su committed the crime of embezzlement, which was why I handed her over to the police. I personally handed over all the crimes she committed at work to the police. I don't care if you're here today because CEO Jin found out about your shady dealings and started a fight with you, or if you're here to seek justice for Supervisor Su. None of this should be blamed on our studio. I'm the person in charge here. It's my right to hand over employees who have committed crimes to the police. You're a successful man nearing his 40s. You have a family and a child. Do you need me to teach you such simple logic that even a primary school student would understand? CEO Zhao's expression was extremely displeased. You're a little girl who hasn't even grown up yet. Are you trying to lecture me? Of course not. I'm not the type of person who would waste my breath on unrelated people. Jinwan coldly curved her lips. To me, it's only Supervisor Su who committed a crime. As for the shady dealings between you and her, since I can find out about it, the police can easily follow the clues and find out as well. Since this matter has passed through the police's hands, it's not strange for your wife to find out about it. So, what's the point of you coming here to act tough? It's not like I allowed you to stay in such an unsafe little hotel. It's not like I was the one who installed illegal cameras. You can't control your lower body, and now you're taking your anger out on us? Ji Bian's face seemed to carry a smile, but his eyes were filled with mockery. Don't king talk nonsense with me here. If I were to get a divorce because of this, the company's shares will change. I'll lose at least several hundred million yuan. How can it be resolved with just a few words from you? Just because you have a backer, you dare to be so arrogant. I think you, little girl, are asking for a lesson. CEO Zhao's expression suddenly turned cold as he gave the thugs a look. The thugs abruptly kicked over the coffee table and spare chairs in the office. They moved forward to drag Jinwan out. Jinwan's brows furrowed. She did not expect these people to be so unreasonable as to act unreasonably in front of her. She stood up and was about to signal the frightened Xiaoba to hurry out and call the police. However, one of the thugs suddenly grabbed Xiaoba's collar and dragged her back. Xiaoba cried out softly. Jinwan's expression changed. She rushed out and was about to help Xiaoba up when the thug suddenly raised his hand to grab Jinwan's hair. Almost at the same time, there was another loud bang from the office door. A figure decisively rushed in. Jinwan had yet to react when Feng Ling, who had abruptly entered, pulled her behind her. Chapter 143. Feng Ling stepped on one of the men's crotch and stomped down harshly. The cries on the ground intensified, causing the office glass to tremble. Jinwan wanted to hold Feng Ling back but was unable to. The short-haired woman's movements were unbelievably nimble. In an instant, Xiao Xiao, who was standing by the side in shock, was kicked in the face. He fell to the ground pathetically, and half his face turned green. There were two more thugs behind them. Seeing this, they immediately rushed over while cursing. Jinwan's fingers gripped Feng Ling's clothes tightly, worried that someone would die. This time, she truly understood how powerful Mo Jingshan was. Right now, she was worried that CEO Zhao's thugs would not be able to leave this place alive. Jinwan resisted the urge to clap and cheer. Her studio had just started. If a murder case were to occur just like that, it would be a huge taboo in doing business. One of the thugs angrily reached over to grab Jinwan's hair and drag her out. The moment his hand approached Jinwan, Feng Ling raised her leg and kicked him. It was as though no matter who the other party was, as long as they dared to touch Jinwan, she would not be polite. Feng Ling directly injured the two men's legs. She could vaguely hear the sound of their kneecaps breaking. Jinwan's back trembled. She then saw that the two men's manhood was about to be destroyed under Feng Ling's feet. Wait, don't kick them. Jinwan rushed to grab Feng Ling's arm. There's a police station near this building. Call the police to come and take them away. There will be people who will teach them a lesson. This country isn't like your overseas training base. Don't kill them. Feng Ling's movements finally paused. Her expression was cold and vicious as she glanced at the trash rolling on the ground. She originally thought that since Jinwan was in the studio and there were security guards in this building, she would be fine as long as she did not go out. She took some time to buy a bottle of water. However, the moment she returned, she heard screams and the sound of things being kicked over. She rushed in to see that Jinwan was almost injured by those people. Feng Ling did not speak. She moved her foot away from the man's manhood and retreated behind Jinwan, maintaining a distance that would not hinder her but ensure her safety. Jinwan helped Xiaoba up. Are you all right? Xiaoba shook her head, looked nervously at the person behind Jinwan, and whispered, Boss, she's amazing. Jinwan smiled. Previously, she had doubted how capable this female bodyguard was. As it turned out, his suspicions were unnecessary. He really shouldn't have. Since she was someone Mo Jingshan had specially selected to be by her side, how could she not be powerful? The police arrived very quickly. When they took the thugs away, President Xiao was also dragged up in a sorry state. Jinwan specially asked the police officer in charge of the previous incident. she confirmed that the video of CEO Xiao and supervisor Su having an affair outside had been discovered by them after their investigation, and that it was not someone from her studio who had nosily handed over the video on her computer. Only then did she feel reassured. As long as these things really had nothing to do with the people in her studio, she was too lazy to ask again. When President Xiao was brought away, he heard Jin Wan's conversation with the police officer. He was slightly vexed, and his expression was difficult to calm down. It was clear that he had already been disturbed at home. A man who originally had good looks and a good family background was beaten black and blue by a female bodyguard in the blink of an eye. Right now, he could not even raise his head. He could only glare at Jin Wan with indignation. In the end, in the next moment, he was held down by the police and brought away. In the evening, Jin Wan went to the construction site under the studio's name and returned after an hour. In the car, Jin Wan sat in the back row, supporting her head with one hand as she read the documents in her other hand. When she heard her phone ring, she picked it up and listened to the report from the HR department. Right now, she had a good understanding of many industries and market trends in the country. She could also guarantee that in the future, the studio would be able to expand. In time, it would definitely become the largest real estate group in the country. However, making money from doing business and managing a business were two different things. Right now, because the studio had received far more investment than expected, the amount of land and real estate she had to purchase would also increase. The studio needed to expand, and the HR department, finance department, and other departments had countless things for her to worry about every day. Jin Wan vainly hoped that in this life, she could stand at the peak of both love and career. However, although she had previously studied in America and had a good degree, she did not have a major in business management or business operation. Even if her brain and foresight were sufficient, she was still somewhat lacking in management. She had only just started, and she was already in a terrible mess. These 2 days, Xia Tian had sent her a message saying that she would come to her studio to help after being discharged from the hospital. However, this was still not enough. Jin Wan supported her head with her hand and placed her phone aside. She turned to look at the darkening sky outside the car window. At night, in the U Garden. With Auntie Chen's dinner, Jin Wan most likely would not have the opportunity to see Mo Jingshan personally cook for a while. On the dining table, Mo Jingshan's chopsticks had just reached over, and Jin Wan's chopsticks accidentally bumped into it. He glanced at her and used his chopsticks to pick up another dish. Jin Wan's chopsticks followed. Like this, the chopsticks fight, for a long time before Mo Jingshan finally put down his chopsticks. His deep, dark eyes stared unblinkingly at Jin Wan, and there seemed to be a faint smile hidden in his eyes. The man's hand was casually placed on the table, and his posture was leisurely. It was a stark contrast to Jin Wan, who seemed to have something on her mind. Something on your mind? His slender fingers picked up the dishes in front of him, placing them in front of Jin Wan in case she could not reach them. Jin Wan finally returned to herself. She raised her head to meet his interested gaze, and when she lowered her head, she saw that almost all of her favorite dishes had been placed in front of her. She directly put down her chopsticks, saying, "Recently, I plan to buy some books on business management and self-study at home. Do you have any good books to recommend?" Mo Jingshan picked up the glass on the table, lowering his head to slowly drink a mouthful of water. Even though he was drinking ordinary water, he still had the elegance and composure of a high-end red wine. Following which, the man unhurriedly said, "It's just an investment of 200 million yuan, and it's already giving you so much pressure? You still want to buy books to self-study business management?" Why did it feel like he was mocking her? Jin Wan picked up her chopsticks again, picking up a mouthful of vegetables and placing it in her mouth to chew. She unhappily said, "Why do I feel like the great Mo is looking down on me? Only you can turn 50 million yuan into 3 billion yuan in 3 years. Can I be better than you?" Chapter 144. Jin Wan pursed her lips. "No, I'm only suitable to be your wife. It's fine to be kissed, hugged, and raised up by you. If you were to be my tutor, I'm sure you'd scold me until I develop a fragile heart." The smile on Mo Jingshan's handsome face deepened. He reached out to ladle a bowl of soup for Jinwan. How could I possibly scold you? That's right, he wouldn't scold her. Wasn't using his actions to make her cry from night to day a more brutal punishment? Eat first. Don't sit there in a daze, Mo Jingshan reminded. Jinwan picked up the bowl and began eating. She quickly and decisively finished her meal before running upstairs into Mo Jingshan's study to look for books. In the end, after searching for a long time, she could not find the books she wanted to read. Instead, they were mostly famous business cases and books in various languages. The rest were mostly files from the company temporarily placed at home. Unable to find them, Jinwan gave up on his study. She turned around to leave when she saw the man standing by the study door. The light in the study was not particularly bright. Mixed with the moonlight shining in from the window, it made him appear like a cool breeze and a bright moon. However, he appeared slightly mysterious. What are you looking for? He entered and reached out to hold Jinwan's back, pulling her in front of him. His fingers gently caressed her hair and slender back. His warm breath landed on Jinwan's cheek, warm and ambiguous. Jinwan thought in her heart, as expected, she couldn't let Mo Jingshan be her tutor. Otherwise, whenever she looked for him to study, he would flirtatiously throw her onto the bed for a while. It would really affect the progress of her studies. I thought there would be books on business management in your study. In the end, there isn't a single one. I don't read those things. Of course, there aren't any. Thus, some geniuses were born with it. Managing such a large company and still managing it in an orderly manner, when Mo Jingshan took over America's Shine Group in the future, he would most likely be just as skilled or even more skilled. Mo Jingshan's cell phone rang. Jinwan did not delay him from picking it up. She turned back to his study and brought out a classic English book with business cases to read. When he returned from the call, the man carried her, who was reading on the bed, onto his lap. Jinwan shifted her gaze away from the book and raised her eyes. Why are you looking at me? I don't understand the books in other languages in your study. I can only read this book in English. Mo Jingshan glanced at her again and took the book from her hands. He flipped through several pages and stopped halfway through, returning the book to her. There are a few foreign real estate marketing cases at the back of this page, he said lightly. Jinwan took a few more serious glances and raised her head to look at his handsome and perfect side profile. She asked in surprise. The books on the bookshelves are written in at least 7 or 8 languages from different countries. Don't tell me you've read all of them? And you remember the contents of every single book? He chuckled and calmly hugged her. Having a photographic memory is also an essential instinct for a business manager. No matter when or where, you must have an impression of every detail that concerns the company, big or small, so that you can better judge the situation and make the most perfect analysis and decision. Jinwan raised the book. You're going to teach me now? If you can maintain your gentlemanly attitude, I can consider letting you be my tutor. Mo Jingshan held back his laughter, caressing her face. I've slept with you countless times inside and out. Now you want me to be a gentleman? Lying to myself is not the attitude a business manager should have. She could not win against him. Jinwan lowered her head to continue reading. Even when night fell, she was still staring at the book on the bed. Mo Jingshan pulled her under the blankets and lightly said, Grandfather just called. He asked us to return to the Mo family home for a night the day after tomorrow. Why are you suddenly going back? Is there something? Mo Jingshan brought Jinwan into his embrace. And Shu Yen and her father will be staying at the Mo family home as guests for the next few days. Their flight back to America has already been booked. Although grandfather does not plan on having too much of a relationship with the Yin family, as the head of the Mo family, he still has to be polite. He asked us to go back for a meal as a farewell. Why do I feel that this isn't a request grandfather would make? Jinwan raised her head to look at Mo Jingshan's expression. Mo Jingshan rubbed her head. You saw through it but didn't say it out loud. You're smart. With me around, no matter if it's the Mo family or the Ji family, no one will dare to eat you. Jinwan bit down on his chin. It's already good enough that I didn't eat and Shu Yen. Who can eat me? Mo Jingshan bit back on her lips. I can eat. Jinwan raised her head to continue biting him. The two of them bit for a long time. Jinwan's breathing became more hurried. In the end, she hurriedly called for a stop and did not move around under him. Mo Jingshan's hand held her slightly cold feet under the blankets. His brows furrowed slightly. Your feet are so cold. It's almost mid-autumn. The weather outside is only a few degrees above zero. Every year, my hands and feet are always cold at this time. Jinwan allowed her feet to remain in his palms and did not pull them out. I heard from the elderly that when your hands and feet are cold, it means that no one is hurting you. Mo Jingshan kissed the corner of her lips. Haven't I doted on you enough? Jinwan had only said it casually, but in the blink of an eye, she was instantly killed by his words. She could not retort back and simply moved her feet in his palms. In an instant, they were held by him again. I won't torment you anymore. Rest early. When you return to the Mo family, go to the back mountain to soak in a hot spring. It'll help with your cold body. His tone was light. Jinwan's eyes immediately brightened. The Mo family's back mountain's hot spring? Isn't that a place that doesn't allow outsiders to enter easily? You're Mrs. Mo, not an outsider. Mo Jingshan's words landed, using his gaze to warn her to quickly place the book in her hands aside. He softly said, Sleep. Perhaps because she was used to being dominated by him in bed, Jinwan immediately obediently placed the book on the bedside table. The next day, Feng Ling drove. Jinwan sat in the car and browsed through the news on her phone. She suddenly saw the news of Haicheng Tianxing Investment Company being taken down. Even if the police were to interfere, their actions would not have been so fast. Furthermore, with money, even the devil would turn millstones. If CEO Xiao and CEO Jin both wanted to protect the company, they could bear with each other and turn the big problem into a small one. The police would not be able to continue interfering. Now that this company had suddenly been taken down, it was equivalent to closing down overnight. Jinwan's fingers paused on the screen. She turned to look at Feng Ling, who was driving. Yesterday's matter, did you tell Mo Jingshan? Feng Ling focused on driving while replying, yes. No wonder. Mo Jingshan was really too black-bellied. Last night, he did not make a move. In the end, this company actually quietly died in his hands. Chapter 145. The next evening, Jinwan and Mo Jingshan returned to the Mo home together and saw several cars parked in the front yard. Director Mo had only returned to the country once, but there were already so many cars following him. As the owner of Shine Group, he was indeed extraordinary. Returning to the country, there were countless bodyguards by his side. Even the bodyguards' cars were all luxury cars worth at least 1 million yuan. It was truly an extraordinary extravagance. By the time the two entered the Mo home, because it was approaching mid-autumn, there was already a festive atmosphere in the house. The moment they entered the front hall, they saw elder Mo and Mo Xiaoza drinking tea and chatting with father. It was as though they were discussing something worth being happy about, and their faces were all filled with smiles. And Shu Yan sat by Father An's side. She raised her eyes to see Jinwan and Mo Jingshan walking in with their fingers intertwined. Seeing this scene, Mo Xiaoza's originally smiling face instantly darkened. He glanced at Father An, and when Father An saw Jinwan, his gaze became more distant and cold. He looked at Jinwan with a judgmental gaze. Grandfather. Jinwan greeted Elder Mo as though there was no one around. Her expression was natural, and she was not swayed by those people's gazes. She then calmly looked at Mo Xiaoza, whose expression was not very good. Dad. Mo Xiaoza coldly retracted his gaze and did not even make a sound in response. Jinwan did not feel awkward. She smiled at Father and Mr. An. I'm Jingshan's wife. My name is Jinwan. After all, Jinwan's attitude was neither servile nor overbearing. No matter how unhappy Father An was, he could not show it as obviously as Mo Xiaoza. Furthermore, Elder Mo was sitting by the side with a smile. No need to be polite. Miss Ji, please sit, Father An replied. And Shu Yan also revealed a polite and mild smile. She looked at Jinwan and then at Mo Jingshan. Mo Jingshan handed the gift box that Jinwan had bought on the way to the housekeeper, Uncle O, saying, Jinwan heard that Dad and Uncle N are going back to the United States. She knows that it's hard to drink authentic domestic tea abroad, and she knows that Dad and Uncle N have a hobby of tasting tea for many years, so she specially bought a few boxes of Bai Luo Chun before coming here. There was obvious dissatisfaction on Mo Xiao's face, but after all, now was not the time to instigate Jinwan in private. Seeing that Jinwan had been so natural and polite since she entered the door, he could not find any fault with her. He frowned slightly and coldly answered, leave it. Just as Uncle O was about to take the boxes of tea they brought to the back, Elder Mo suddenly looked back and raised his eyebrows. Is it Dong Ting Biluakun? This is indeed an authentic good tea that is hard to buy overseas. I haven't drunk Bai Luo Chun in a long time. Quick, brew the tea that Ji last brought, I want to taste it first. Okay, Grandpa, Uncle O answered and left. Ji lass, don't just stand there. Why you still standing in front of your own house? Come and sit with Grandpa. Elder Mo waved to Jinwan again. Jinwan walked over with a smile, exchanged a look with Mo Jingshan, and sat down next to Elder Mo. Speaking of which, this is the second time I've seen Miss Ji. At this time, Father N suddenly spoke, looking at Jinwan inquiringly. That day at the dinner party of Shine, I didn't have a chance to talk to Miss Ji. I only remember that Jingshan took you upstairs. Was Miss Ji not feeling well at that time? Almost everyone present knew what had happened to Jinwan that day. Mo Xiaoza, the initiator of the incident, was sitting next to him, but Father N asked this question. He was clearly deliberately making things difficult for Jinwan. Jinwan smiled frankly. That day, I accidentally drank too much and fell asleep in the bathroom. If Jingshan hadn't found me, I would have slept in there all night. I was so shameful that day. Mr. N, please don't make fun of me. Elder Mo, on the other hand, laughed by the side. The others naturally could not laugh. Her reply was too magnanimous. It was like a child who had accidentally drunk too much and was sticking out her tongue to beg for forgiveness in front of her elders. However, she avoided being instigated. This caused Father N to involuntarily narrow his eyes. Mo Jingshan's gaze carried a smile, and his tone was calm as he spoke. The small matters between husband and wife really shouldn't be brought up to the table. She usually doesn't have many opportunities to drink, and her alcohol tolerance is indeed poor. That night, she only drank a few glasses of champagne before finding a place to sleep. It took me a long time to find her. A few glasses of champagne and you're already drunk. Miss G's alcohol tolerance is indeed not good. Father N also smiled, but his smile did not reach his eyes. Mr. N, you really are making fun of me. When I was young, I often took medicine. During those years, I was allergic to alcohol. After I grew up, I was no longer allergic, but my father never allowed me to drink. My temper is a little stubborn. I feel that if others can drink, I can also drink. Thus, I often find opportunities to secretly drink a few glasses, but every time, I'm a complete drunk. She smiled as she spoke. Jingshan is also always controlling me. That night, I secretly hid by the side and drank a few glasses. In the end, I almost made a fool of myself. Jinwan lowered her brows as though she was very embarrassed. These few days, Jingshan has been nagging me quite a bit. In the future, he most likely won't allow me to touch a single drop of alcohol. He's even stricter than my father. Father An's smile faded slightly. His eyes coldly stared at Jinwan, who had been smiling the entire time. He was already somewhat unhappy, but he did not say it out loud. For a man to control his wife like this, to the point that he would constantly watch over such a small matter like drinking, the underlying meaning was that Mo Jingshan really cared about Jinwan. Mo Xiaoza could hear that Jinwan, this clear-headed little lass, was purposely putting Father N in a bad spot. His cold voice abruptly rang out. If your alcohol tolerance isn't good, then don't come out and walk around. After all, you still have the title of Mrs. Mo on your head. If there's a day when you drink a few drops of alcohol in public, you won't only be throwing away your own face. The moment Mo Xiaoza's words came out, before anyone else could speak, Elder Mo immediately glared at him. "What are you talking about? That G-brat, no matter if she's at home or outside, no one can find any fault with her actions." Mo Xiao's sharp gaze turned cold. In front of everyone, being carried back to the room by Jing Xin in front of everyone, isn't that embarrassing enough? In front of so many people, just whose actions are the most unpresentable. Mo Jingxin calmly spoke. His voice was cold. "Do you really want to say it out loud here?" Although Mo Jingxin's voice was clearly no different from his usual tone, everyone present could acutely sense the hidden undercurrent within. They only needed to be distracted for a moment, and it was as though they would be frozen into ice by his silent, biting coldness. Chapter 146. Mo Jingxin's eyes were dark. His thin lips curved up, but his smile was cold. It's exactly what the words mean. After exposing everything under the thin paper in front of everyone, Mo Xiao's expression could no longer maintain his composure. His expression was enraged. The father and son exchanged glances. In an instant, the hall became as cold as an icehouse. And Shu Yan, who sat by Father An's side, did not speak. She raised her eyes to see Mo Jingxin sitting there. Although his expression was cold, he still maintained the position of holding Ji Nuan's 10 fingers. His 2 long legs wrapped in his suit pants were lazily crossed. His entire person appeared calm and casual, but his brows carried a viciousness that surpassed this hypocritical calmness. The matter of Ji Nuan being locked in the restroom that day, he did not plan on letting it go so peacefully. This topic should not have been brought up in the first place. If they really brought it up, the one who would suffer in the end would not be Ji Nuan, who had been pressured by them. Just as Mo Xiaozo was about to open his mouth in anger, and Shu Yan warmly suggested, "Grandfather Mo, I heard that the back mountain of the Mo family has a spring that was dug out 100 years ago. It's connected to Hai Cheng's dragon vein and is a natural 4-colored hot spring that is rarely seen in the country. Before returning to America, would Shu Yan have the luck to soak in this legendary Mo family hot spring?" It was clear that Shu Yan was trying to change the topic and pause this scene of colliding icebergs. Mo Xiaoza unhappily glanced at Ji Nuan. However, Ji Nuan only smiled at him. Unlike the sharp words she used in front of the hotel that day, in front of outsiders, she still had her own sense of propriety. Although this young girl appeared to be relying on Mo Jingxin's presence to protect her, her mind was clear and she knew how to cooperate with Mo Jingxin. Every word, action was perfectly coordinated. At this moment, Elder Mo was already smiling at Shu Yan. "Aya, it's just a private hot spring at home. It's not as amazing as you say." "Grandfather Mo, you're too humble. The Mo family's hot spring has always been famous in the country." And Shu Yan followed the elder's good mood and continued, "I heard that frequently soaking in the Mo family's 4-colored hot spring can cure 100 illnesses. It's all because it's been exaggerated by outsiders. The so-called 4 colors hot spring is actually the result of the Chinese medicine developed by the Mo family over the last few decades." As Elder Mo spoke, he stood up. "It just so happens that there are quite a few small hot springs on the other side of the hot spring. It's more suitable for you ladies to go together. Since Shu Yan wants to go take a look, then let's all go soak in it today." As he spoke, Elder Mo continued, "Jing Shen bring the G-brat along. It's good for the body to soak in the hot spring often. Right now, the G-brat is burdened with the mission of letting me carry my great-grandson as soon as possible. We can't miss out on something like this." Old Master Xing's words were really well thought out, completely cutting off Shu Yan's last chance to perform. He was truly protecting Ji Nuan. Father An did not know how to express his thoughts. And Shu Yan continued to smile gracefully, but her gaze occasionally shifted toward Mo Jingxin's position. The Mo family's hot spring was indeed different from the various high-grade and low-grade hot springs outside. It was located in the back mountain of the Mo family's home and was meticulously built in an antique-style cave. Although under Elder Mo's warm invitation, there were many people who came to soak in the hot spring together. Thankfully, the 4 colors hot spring was located in the center, and there were several small springs and hot springs that were blocked off. It was convenient for Shuyen and Jinwan. After all, the elder and the others were men. It was not a big deal for them to chat and soak in the Four Colors hot spring. However, Shuyen and Jinwan were women. Even if they were both wearing clothes, it was still not very appropriate. Jinwan was arranged to stay in the innermost medicinal spring. When she passed by the rose spring behind a stone door, she saw that Shuyen had already been brought in by the Mo family's helper. The medicinal spring was located in the innermost part of the hot spring cave. It was very secluded. When Jinwan sat in the hot spring, she felt slightly hot. After slowly adjusting to the temperature, her face began to sweat. She felt very comfortable and slowly stretched her body to lean against the spring. Her hair was tied up high, and her exposed neck and face were gradually covered in sweat due to the temperature of the water. After soaking like this for about 20 minutes, Jinwan was so comfortable that she almost fell asleep. All of a sudden, there seemed to be someone approaching from behind, but there was no particularly big movement. She abruptly returned to her senses and turned back to see Mo Jingshan walking in with the medicinal fragrance of the Four Colors hot spring. Jinwan was startled. "Why aren't you continuing to stay with grandfather and the others? I can't possibly leave you here alone. It's easy to fall asleep after soaking in the hot spring for too long. I'm here to take a look." Mo Jingshan said he was only here to take a look, but he had already unhurriedly walked in. As he entered the pool of hot spring in front of her, the water surface rippled slightly. Jinwan originally sat in the hot spring without moving. The man's arm reached out from the water and directly pulled her over, asking, "How do you feel?" "It's all right. It's just a little hot." Mo Jingshan smiled, holding her and sitting with her for a while. He lowered his eyes to see that her little face was slightly red from the heat of the water and was about to kiss her on the cheek. All of a sudden, there seemed to be someone approaching from outside. Jinwan heard the sound. Afraid that someone would see her, she rushed to push him away. However, the man tightened his grip around her waist. At the same time, he turned back, calmly watching Shuyen, who had suddenly walked in. And Shuyen clearly did not expect to see Mo Jingshan here, nor did she expect to see the two of them in the hot spring, hugging each other. The moment she walked in and saw such a scene, her first reaction was not to leave immediately. Instead, she stood there, as though she had not returned to her senses for a while. "Sorry." 10 seconds later, she forced herself to return to her senses. She looked at them. "Mo, earlier on, I was a little bored at the Rose Spring and wanted to come over to chat with Mrs. Mo. I didn't expect..." Mo Jingshan's tone was mild. "There's nothing to apologize for. But if you and Jinwan are in the same hot spring, it will only be more boring." And Shuyen's expression faltered. Jinwan also subtly glanced at Shuyen. The meaning behind Mo Jingshan's words was to mock Shuyen for running over to chat with Jinwan. In the end, it would only result in the two women sitting together awkwardly finding topics to talk about. Thus, it was true that there was no need for her to come and chat with Jinwan. Even if they did chat, there would not be any good things to talk about. This man hid a poisonous tongue behind his composure. He was truly magnanimous and heartless. From start to finish, Mo Jingshan did not seem to have crossed the line with Shuyen in any way that he should not have. Even at the Shine Group's banquet, he was still cold and warm, maintaining a seal of alienation and indifference. You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.